Please come to order. Good morning. Welcome to the Commissioners of St. Mary's County meeting this date, Tuesday, November 16th, 2021. I am Randy Guy, President Commissioner of St. Mary's County. I'd like to introduce the other commissioners. Sitting to my right, representing the 1st Commissioner District, which includes Ridge, Piney Point, St. George Island, Mr. Eric Colvin.
Good morning.
Representing the 2nd Commissioner District, which includes Leonardtown, Hollywood, Mr. Mike Hewitt.
Good morning.
Sitting to my left, representing John O'Connor, who represents the 3rd Commissioner District, which includes Charlotte Hall, 7th District, Golden Beach, Mechanicsville, is joining us by Zoom today. John, you on?
Good morning.
Okay, representing the 4th Commissioner District, which includes Lexington Park, some of California, Great Mills, and some of Hollywood, Mr. Todd Morgan. Dr. Rebecca Bridget, our County Administrator, is sitting at the table to my left.
Good morning.
Elisa Cassis, our Communications Director, is sitting at the table to my right.
Good morning.
Amy Carter, our video media producer, is behind the glass. Please turn your cell phones off or on vibrate. When you come to the presenters table, please approach by coming down the center aisle. And remember, this meeting is being televised, so you need to speak clearly and directly into the microphone for recording purposes. At this time, we'll have Commissioner Morgan with invocation and pledge. Please stand.
Dear Heavenly Father, we give you thanks today for our families, for our community, for our nation. Help and guide us in our decisions. Keep us ever mindful of your needs and the wants of others. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please seat it. Thank you, Commissioner Morgan. Okay, next we need the approval of the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda, which includes the minutes of November 2nd, 2021 as presented.
Second.
Have a first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any disapprovals? Ayes have it. Okay, next we have today a recognition of our Citizens Academy participants. And I want to thank all of you for participating in this. It gives you a behind the scenes of the government. And I'd also like to tell you that this sort of prepares you to volunteer for many of our boards and committees. I'm sure they told you all about this. And it sort of prepares you for your next step in life as you decide to run for public office, right? Everybody's going to do that, I hope.
Worked for me.
So at this time, we will have a presentation and recognition. I think you're taking that, Dr. Bridget.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner President Guy. As I announce your name for the Citizens Academy as a participant, if you will come to the front, please, and stand in front of the table, the commissioners will have a group photo at the end. Thank again those that participated, and I'll announce them in alphabetical order. Dagmar Blackwell, Catherine Buckler, Judith Guy, Tricia Herr, Kayla Beth Lankford, Diana Little, Thea Newton, Brandon Russell, Roosevelt White, and Stuart Wilt. And is Robin Johnson here as well? Thank you, Robin. And is there anyone else that I missed? Great, thank you.
Do you want to see the certificates or no?
Yes, please.
I'd like to have a chance to vote for one of you. I'll be looking for you.
All right, everyone.
Thank you.
And like I've already said, I expect to see some of these names pop up on our volunteers for many boards we have and committees in our government. I thank you all very much for participating. And next on our agenda is a public hearing by the Department of Land Use and Growth Management, repeal and reenact the St. Mary's County Electrical Code Ordinance. It's being presented by the Director of Land Use and Growth Management, Mr. William Hunt, and the Deputy Director, Mr. Harry Knight.
Thank you, President Guy.
Yes, sir.
I see by our timeline that the public hearing was scheduled to start at 9:15.
Uh-oh.
Thank you, Bill, for noticing that. Commissioner Guy.
Can we delay it?
If we can postpone that and do the two proclamations first, then we should be okay. because
Okay, I'm
the
sorry,
public-
gentlemen, I called you up too early. But we'll do the proclamations then, and then we'll get back to you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you very
Bill.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Guy.
Okay, then we'll do the first proclamation, which is Giving Tuesday. I think Commissioner Colvin has that one.
Yes, so who's going to be? All right, very good. It's Catherine Pratson, our Director of Human Resources, and Cynthia Tomlinson, Wellness and Safety Officer. Thank you all.
Good morning.
So, good morning. This proclamation reads, whereas Giving Tuesday in St. Mary's County was established ahead of the Thanksgiving holiday to kick off the annual United Way and CHC Creating Healthier Communities Giving Campaign, providing employees the opportunity to pledge via payroll deduction in the upcoming year, and whereas Giving Tuesday in St. Mary's County is an opportunity to engage citizens and employees of St. Mary's County government who serve others throughout this holiday season, including during the nationally recognized Day of Giving on the Tuesday after Thanksgiving and during other times of the year. And whereas employees demonstrating their commitment to our community by contributing more than $5,100 last year to the United Way of Southern Maryland, formerly United Way of St. Mary's County, and to CHC Creating Healthier Communities, and employees who pledge to contribute $2 or more per pay period may participate in Blue Jeans Fridays. And whereas it is fitting and proper on this and every day to recognize the tremendous impact of philanthropy, volunteerism, and community service in St. Mary's County, now therefore we, the Commissioners of St. Mary's County, do hereby proclaim November 16, 2021 as Giving Tuesday in St. Mary's County and recognize United Way of Southern Maryland and CHC Creating Healthier Communities for impact on the health and well-being of citizens of St. Mary's County and beyond, and encourage citizens of St. Mary's County to join together to give back to the community in any way that is personally meaningful. This date, November 16, 2021.
Well, thank you, Commissioners, for recognizing our employees and their extraordinary capability and willingness to give back. And this provides an opportunity through payroll deduction, and it kicks off a month-long initiative that Cindy will be managing from our office. And we appreciate the forum and the opportunity to advertise this to everyone. So thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all for doing this. Thank you.
And we get to stay.
And next, we have the Great American Smokeout. I think be done by Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you. You guys don't even move, that's pretty good. We haven't
Right,
had
I
one of
know.
these.
How about that?
Whereas the Commissioners of St. Mary's County encourage citizens to commit or to recommit to a healthy, smoke-free lives by participating in the American Cancer Society's 46th annual Great American Smokeout event. And whereas cigarette smoking remains the leading cause of preventable cause of death and disease in the United States, to over 480,000 deaths, including an estimated 41,000 from secondhand smoke exposure each year, and more than 16 million Americans living with a smoking-related disease. And whereas the most important thing smokers can do to improve their health is to quit smoking cigarettes and other forms of tobacco. And whereas quitting smoking improves health immediately and over the long term, and stopping smoking is difficult, and chances of success increase with assistance. Now, therefore, we, the Commissioners of St. Mary's County, in partnership with the St. Mary's County Health Department and the American Cancer Society, do hereby proclaim November 18, 2021, Great American Smokeout Day in St. Mary's County, and encourage all citizens to commit or recommit to year-round smoke-free lives this date, November 16, 2021.
So thank you again for providing the opportunity to recognize this day every year. And the journey to tobacco-free is difficult for many, and really appreciate your support. We offer assistance through the health department and also through our insurance carrier. So again, Cindy, we could connect employees to those initiatives, and any of the public who are here certainly can take advantage of any of the opportunities through the health department.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think we're about to hit the 9:15 mark. Yep, my computer just said so. So we'll now go to the public hearing again, the Department of Land Use Growth Management, public hearing, repeal and reenact the St. Mary's County Electrical Codes Ordinance. Mr. Hunt and Mr. Knight again.
Thank you, President Guy, Commissioners, Dr. Bridget. I'm appearing today to introduce a public hearing to repeal and reenact the county's electrical codes ordinance. Harry Knight, Deputy Director and longtime staff to the County Board of Electrical Examiners, is present also. The primary reason for this action is that the state passed a law pertaining to the licensing of master electricians. Before the state law, St. Mary's and other local governments had the authority to issue master electricians licenses. With the recent state law, only the State Board of Electricians can issue master electricians licenses. The county will still have tests for restricted, low voltage, and homeowners licenses and will issue those licenses. That concludes my introduction to this public hearing, unless there's something that the commissioners would like to ask at this time.
One question. Is the intention, will there be a fee for master electrician registration?
Yes.
Okay.
I was approached by a master electrician, or currently someone who holds a master electrician's license, and he asked me, what's the impact on him? I don't know. I told him I don't know. I'm asking you.
Thank you.
Well, the change of the word from license to registration. So there's no proposed changes in the size of the fee nor the procedures for accepting applications, reviewing applications, and approving applications. But they're no longer allowed to be called licenses. The state says we may issue registrations.
Okay, so it's just... yeah.
But the impact is they're paying double the fee because they have to pay for the state license now, correct?
They are required to obtain a state license by a certain deadline, because some...
And there's a fee for that?
I'm sure there is.
Yes.
Yes.
So I know PG County does not have a fee for their master electrician registration.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no difference between, there's no special St. Mary's County electrical code. Is that correct?
We are obligated to adopt the same electrical code that the state adopts.
Right, but we don't have an addendum to ours like Calvert County does. Is that correct?
I would say we don't have any amendments to the national electrical code.
Okay.
That is correct.
Okay.
Well, the case with the person I know, his employer pays it, because it behooves him to have an electrician who has a master's registration or license on his, in his company.
Mm-hmm.
So the key will be the difference will be, it won't change the person actually doing the work, but the person who has to apply to the license will pay a higher fee now.
There's no proposal to increase the fee. The current license fee in St. Mary's County is $150. It's set by the Board of Electrical Examiners. It certainly could be adjusted.
No, I'm not recommending that at all. but will there be an additional fee for the state, like Commissioner Colvin's referring to?
I regret I don't know what the state charges, but I doubt that the state issues a license for free. So I agree with Commissioner Colvin that there must be a state fee.
Okay, thank you. That answers it.
Any other questions, Commissioners? Okay, Dr. Bridget will now provide a format for the public hearing.
Thank you, Commissioner President Guy. This is here are the guidelines for the Commissioners of St. Mary's County public hearing for the Department of Land Use and Growth Management request to repeal and reenact the St. Mary's County Electrical Codes Ordinance. If you wish to address the Commissioners via teleconference, please call 301-475-4200, extension 1234, to provide your name and address for the record. You will then be given an opportunity to speak to the Commissioners through the phone conference. All speakers who wish to address the Commissioners in person are asked to fill out the sign-up sheet located in the lobby of the Chesapeake Building. All speakers will be allotted 3 minutes to address the Commissioners. At the end of the 3 minutes, our Communications Director, Elisa Casas, will let you know that your time has expired. We ask that you respect the 3-minute time limit in order to give all those who wish to participate an opportunity to be heard. This public hearing is being televised live on St. Mary's County Government TV 95 and the county's YouTube channel. If you should miss any part of the hearing, it will re-air on Channel 95 this Friday, November 19th at 6:45 p.m. and will remain available for on-demand viewing on the St. Mary's County Government YouTube channel. Citizens were provided an opportunity to address the Commissioners via video submissions, but because we did not receive any video submissions, the Department of Land Use and Growth Management requests to repeal and reenact the St. Mary's County Electrical Codes Ordinance. We will now begin accepting comments for those who have signed up to speak in person. Sharon, do we have anyone that has signed up to speak in person? Just the one sheet. So we have Donald Haskin, who's indicated he's signed up but not interested in speaking. Mr. Haskin? Thank you. Does anyone else care to speak for the public hearing? Yes, ma'am. If you'll come up to the microphone and state your name and address for the record, please.
Brenda Sanji, Leonardtown, Maryland. I don't have a dog in this fight. I just Googled how much the state fees were and thought you might want it for the record. It says for a master's electrical license, you need 7 years of work experience under the supervision of an already licensed master electrician and pass the necessary exam. After passing the master electrician exam and paying $190 licensing fee, you must submit an online application to obtain your license. It appears as though to license, I guess, non-masters is $20 for the state.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate that.
Google. Good thing.
Is anyone else, would anyone else like to speak? Ms. Casas, do we have anyone signed up for the teleconferencing system?
Good morning, Dr. Bridget. Good morning, Commissioners. It doesn't appear that we do. I'll check in with our teleconference center. Good morning, Julie. It's Elisa Casas. I'm calling to see if we have any callers on our teleconference line for the Commissioners of St. Mary's County public hearing this morning. Thank you, Julie. Commissioners, Dr. Bridget, we have no callers on our teleconference line for this morning's public hearing.
Thank you, Ms. Casas. And is there anyone else in the audience that has, this is your second opportunity to speak before the public hearing is closed? Please note that the public comment period will remain open for 7 days until close of business on November 23rd. Should the public wish to send an email to csmc@stmarysmd.com or U.S. mail to P.O. Box 653, Leonardtown, Maryland 20650. Commissioner President Guy, this concludes our public hearing.
Thank you, Dr. Bridget. Appreciate it. As we have no other further comments, you may send them in, like she just said, and we'll take them for a couple of weeks here, and we'll come to a final decision. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Public hearing closed. I think we're a little early for our Board of Health thing, but we'll go right into the next main agenda item is the Department of Land Use and Growth Management request for a hearing amending a comprehensive zoning ordinance for agricultural alcohol beverage production and alcohol beverage production and to delete the current use of distillery, winery, and farm brewery.
Thank you again, sir. Chris Castellamus is, of course, here with me today, Director of Economic Development. This ordinance began in 2020 with the meeting of owners of existing and potential businesses wanting to produce alcoholic beverages in St. Mary's County. Attendees at that meeting identified standards in the zoning ordinance that make it difficult for agricultural alcoholic beverage production businesses to get started in the county. Departments of Land Use and Growth Management and Economic Development began writing an amendment to encourage the growth of on-farm alcoholic beverage production. As staff considered this amendment for agricultural alcoholic beverage production, the topic of alcoholic beverage production for locations other than farms began to be considered. Since alcoholic beverage production is an attraction for tourism overall, staff expanded the proposed zoning ordinance to include production of alcoholic beverages outside an agricultural location. Like agricultural beverage production, the general production of alcoholic beverages would be allowed with the approval of a minor site plan. Alcoholic beverage production outside the ACUs will be allowed along with tasting rooms and serving of beverages and foods. Beverage and food service will not be allowed within the ACUs. There's a PowerPoint presentation that I would like to present.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Got it.
Thank you. Second slide. In the ordinance, there are two new uses for alcoholic beverage production proposed, as I just said, for agricultural alcoholic and then for alcoholic beverage production not on a farm. Next. Wanted to point out that the zoning ordinance currently allows these uses with different terms and different requirements. So what would be deleted from the present ordinance to replace it with the two new uses is distillery, farm brewery, next, winery, next, and then the origin of the proposed amendment again. In February 2020, Grow and Fortify, a company that assists new value-added agricultural businesses, organized a meeting of existing and in-planning alcohol manufacturers in St. Mary's County. Next. Stakeholders identified impediments to the zoning ordinance that make it difficult to start such a business. Next. So our two departments began to write the amendment that's before you today. Next. In 2021, in July, Land Use Growth Management and Economic Development presented the conceptual changes in the ordinance to stakeholders and to the St. Mary's County Agricultural, Seafood, and Forestry Board. The response to all the stakeholders who we've contacted has been favorable. Next. The suggestions from the stakeholders that you'll see in this amendment is that there be a requirement that agricultural alcoholic beverage production be on property that has an agricultural use assessment by the Maryland State Department of Assessments and Taxation, and that approval of these uses be with a minor site plan. Next. To promote tourism, an alcoholic beverage production business wishing to locate on non-agricultural property should also be through a minor site plan. Next. Wanted to stress the difference between property in the ACUs and not in the ACUs. Tasting rooms and serving food or beverages will not be allowed in the ACUs. Next. And the reason why that's, I think, important at the outset in this amendment is that in reading about how some of these distilleries and alcoholic beverage production uses in other areas, some of them really catch the public imagination and take off, part of a business plan, if it's going to want to include a tasting room at some point, either initially or later point, needs to be sure that they're not locating in the ACUs initially, because the idea of having sit-down beverage and food service is a use that's not allowed in the ACU. So it's just a caution to say, we hope you're successful, but be successful in the location where you're going to end up being as successful as you want to be. Then we have definition of terms in the ordinance, which, as you see there, are fairly straightforward. We're following what the state says in the alcoholic beverage ordinance, or beverage article. It has to be on agricultural land. Next is, of course, related to the manufacture, packaging, storage, promotion, or sales of alcoholic beverages, and uses ingredients produced on the agricultural land or any associated agricultural land. Properties outside the ACUs can include a tasting room. Next. For alcoholic beverage production, it's similar, except that it would be allowed any place, not just on ag land. Once again, property outside the ACUs can include a tasting room. Next. And then there's a definition for a tasting room, which is, as you would infer from the title, is a place where you would sample the alcoholic beverages that are produced by the manufacturer, located on the same site. Along with the tasting, generally food is offered, and this may be complimentary or for sale, so it doesn't matter if it's given away or if you have to buy it, it falls under that definition. And with that, Mr. Castellanos and I are here for any questions if you have them. Again, we're asking for a public hearing, and the requested date would be December 7th. We'd need to know if you agree to this, if it would be a morning or an afternoon public hearing.
A day that will last in infamy. The question I have is, a lot of towns and areas are starting to have, little homemade beer gardens. And they're making beer, and it becomes a big tourist thing and stuff like that. So my question is, in this dialogue we're having, do they have to be on agricultural land, or could, Leonardtown or Charlotte Hall or Lexington Park, establish, a place that can, brew beer and then sell beer from their location?
You don't need to have agricultural land to have one of these uses. They're separated into two different types.
So what's the agricultural land piece of this? I'm kind of confused.
To have that, you need to qualify under the state law for farm, and maybe you know more about this than me, Chris, on this point.
You have to produce the ingredients on your site.
Yeah. Right, Commissioner Morgan. We're trying to simplify the process, especially for production on ag land. So if you really have a farmer, and we've tightened up the definition, you're a farm. If SDAT says you're a farm, and they've classified you for assessment purposes as a farm, then it's easier to get production approval and also to do a tasting room. So that part of it we're kind of simplified.
Would the tobacco barn be an example of that?
Absolutely. Yep.
Thank you.
So I think it's a good idea for the agricultural land piece, because a lot of what we talk about is helping to protect the family-owned farms, and this is another avenue for them. And I'm just trying to see how that balances with the non-agricultural land piece. Any thoughts? Is it just totally different things? I guess trying to understand what it provides.
Well, I think the regular commercial, to do a brewery in a commercial center, I think that's already allowed, and I don't think that's changing at all with what we're doing here. Is that right, Bill?
Well, what this would do for this particular use is allow it with the minor site plan, as opposed to a concept site plan.
Okay.
So that would be an impetus for entrepreneurs, particularly from the tourist aspect, is where this becomes important.
Okay.
On property that is not the ag property.
So currently, if you want to do a tasting room like Tobacco Barn, you have to go through the major site plan process, which is planning commission, public hearing. Here we're changing it to an administrative process, or proposing an administrative process where it goes through Mr. Hunt and his team.
Bottom line is, it makes it a lot cheaper as far as doing all that.
And quicker, I would think.
Quicker, and, you know.
Well, that's cheaper and quicker. Yeah.
Reduces the price.
But my question to you is will they be required, let's say, for instance, will they have on and off sales? Will people be able to say, hey, I'm going to go out to I love going out to, what's that place? The farm up there on Route 5, the Wood Zone. And they have pies there. They got all kinds of, you go in that place.
Forest Hall?
Yeah, Forest Hall. That's what I'm sorry. Yeah, I forgot the name. But, that's a real commercial operation, which is a good thing. It's a good thing. But is this the same type of idea where people be able to go to their place and buy their booze off the shelf? I shouldn't say booze, their product off the shelf.
Yes, that would be. If you don't want a tasting room, you would be allowed to have your package sales from your premises.
Okay.
So you could brew it and sell it out the door without the tasting room, unless you wanted to. If you were in the AQs, you couldn't have the tasting room. But otherwise, your business plan could include just on-site sales, or can include a tasting room, or could include no sales from your premises as well. Some places might just bottle it and distribute it to local bars and restaurants, and not want to sell it off on premises at all. All of those options would be
The
available.
last question I had was, you said stakeholders. Are there a lot of people who want to do this?
I'm not aware of a large number. Chris might be more familiar than I am with
Is this like 1 or 2 people, or is this?
No,
like
we had,
10?
the meeting we had had a fairly large number. We had a large
Okay.
room, a lot of people who are in the business and kind of relay their experiences, how it's a little bit challenging, and those that have wanted to get in the business and they want to get a brewery going or something, and they said, hey, if you can streamline it, that'd be a big help to us. And, what I've heard, and I know we have Barbara Zapata with us in the audience, Executive Director of Visit St. Mary's. I think we're a little bit behind the larger region in terms of wineries, breweries, and distilleries, and we know that tourists want experiences. They want to come, and so do locals too. You want to go to a wine tasting room and hang out and maybe hear some music and stuff, so that draws people. But 1 or 2 doesn't draw people like a critical mass does, so we want to make sure we have enough. And we're encouraging these types of businesses because, if you go Northern Virginia, different places, and they have wineries going, a lot of people come, stay at those hotels, stay at the inns, spend money at local businesses. So I think it's an important tourism component and big for economic development, too.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, wasn't it the Copsey family that came in and wanted to make bourbon or rye or something?
Is that Southern Trails?
I don't know what it is. That was the Copsey family. Mike, do you remember? Am I right?
What's that now?
Wasn't it the Copsey family came in and wanted to make rye or bourbon or something? And
I don't remember.
I guess are they part of this? Are you familiar?
I'm not familiar with people of that name attending any of the meetings that I've been to.
Yeah, I'm not sure they participated in the meeting, but we had Maryland Grow and Fortify is the lobbying group that organizes throughout the state, all the distilleries, breweries, and they reached out to all stakeholders and people that they're associated with to come to the 2 meetings we had.
But it won't require a change in the zoning. If someone's got an ag zoning, it doesn't change.
No, this wouldn't change zoning. This just is the use that's
The use
allowed
in the
in the
zone.
various zoning districts, along with some standards to go with it.
Okay.
Mr. President, I move that the Department of Land Use and Growth Management be authorized to schedule a morning public hearing for the proposed ordinance for agriculture, alcoholic beverage production, and alcoholic beverage production, including the delineation of the current uses of distillery, winery, and farm brewery.
Second.
Excuse me?
The deletion of the.
I apologize, the deletion of the current uses.
Thanks, Commissioner
Okay.
Morgan.
Okay, I have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Ayes have it.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you.
I know we're a little early for the Board of Health, but I see that
Yeah, she's here.
Dr. Brewster is here.
All right, I move to adjourn as the Commissioners of St. Mary's County and reconvene as the St. Mary's County Board of Health.
Second.
I have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Ayes have it. Morning, Dr. Brewster.
Good morning. How are you, sirs?
Very good.
Morning. Hi, Lisa. Thank you, Lisa, for handling the slides. All right, good morning. November, lots of updates since we last met in October as our Board of Health. And definitely want to run through COVID as usual, answer what questions you might have about COVID, but then also want to wrap up and talk a little bit about some amazing action that you all have taken to support behavioral health in our community. Okay. We can get started to the next slide, please. So our COVID data dashboard, since we've last met, has been updated with some new data metrics. For those who are following the daily data dashboard that we publish locally, they'll see some additional data points on some of our graphs. We are still in high transmission of COVID-19 based on our local data calculations. And the reason why I qualify this is that the CDC has recently changed our transmission designation to substantial. But again, the CDC data analysis involves duplicates, and it does not account for antigen positive cases of COVID-19. Our local data analysis does, and we apply the CDC data metrics to our local data analysis. And we do remove duplicates from our local data analysis to be more accurate and comprehensive in depicting the state of COVID in our county. So based on that, we are still in high community transmission. However, if you move to the next slide, we have several metrics that have helped things along the way. And we are seeing a rise in vaccination rates in our county. More recently, as you may already know, we've started vaccinating 5 to 11-year-olds in the county as well. So that's a data point that's now being reflected on the vaccine charts on our daily data website. The top.
Let me ask you a question about that real quick.
Yes, sir.
So when we say we're vaccinating 5 to 11-year-olds, do we also take that population and add it to our population of unvaccinated?
That's a great question. The way this chart is set up is the denominator is the estimated population for that age group. So, for example, where you see 7.7%,
yeah,
that's 7.7% of the estimated 5 to 11 aged population in St. Mary's County.
Okay, I think that's how, excuse me, I think that's how I interpreted it.
Mm-hmm.
But that seems low to me. So it seems
Well, we just started. We just started November 5th, so not even, a week, 2 weeks.
I guess what I'm trying to say to you is that, we just recently heard something in Calvert County where they had a hiccup with someone who got vaccinated that hiccup. And hopefully that doesn't happen here.
Yeah, and I can talk about some of the safety procedures that we have in place at our vaccine
Okay,
sites.
go ahead, and I'll let you continue.
Yeah, so I'll go through the data, and then certainly we can talk about all those questions you may have about safety. So the first top chart is about dose 1, and of course these are individuals who have not yet received their second dose, for example, if they're using Pfizer or Moderna, and that and also reflects those individuals. I'm sorry, the bottom one doesn't reflect this, the people who are partially vaccinated. It's the people who've gotten their final dose of the primary series. But as you can see, we've done 7.7% of our 5 to 11 population, and some of the other age groups are also seeing increases in the vaccination rates in those age groups as well. If you move to the next slide, please. Fortunately, even though we are still considered high transmission based on our local data analysis and metrics, we have seen an ongoing decline in local COVID-19 transmission based on the number of weekly new COVID cases for our county. For the week ending last week, just over 100 new cases of COVID-19. Still, we're seeing the majority of cases happening in those who are not vaccinated, although we still see some breakthrough cases as to be expected. Again, the vaccines aren't 100%, and we're also dealing with high transmission rates and waning immunity. So we are going to see some levels of breakthrough infection as well, but those are declining as well. Go to the next slide, please. This also depicts that decline in the surge that we've been dealing with, the primarily Delta surge we've been dealing with case rates dropping here locally.
So, quick question on this. we're showing 15 cases per 100,000, is that?
Per day.
Per day.
Yeah.
What
It's
is-
a 7-day rolling average.
I guess how do we understand what metric to look at for when we would leave high transmission to substantial transmission?
There's two metrics that are factored in there. It's the new case rate, similar to what it's shown here, and then it also looks at PCR positivity, which I think I may have on here. If it's not on here, it'll be on our website as well. And so there's specific metrics for each of those, and when you reach certain thresholds, it drops down to the lower rate. So we're actually, according to the CDC, because they're only looking at PCR cases, not antigen cases, which according to contact tracing, for example, in Maryland, contact tracing would indicate that antigen-positive cases are about 30% of the cases. So if you're not counting 30% of the cases, then those numbers, that are reflected at the national and state level are probably not accounting for the complete picture of COVID transmission in your community. But according to the local data analysis that we have, we definitely have seen this ongoing decline. We're still, wanting to get it down further, though, of course.
Dr. Brewster, Commissioner Colvin asked a good question. We've seen the red every week now for a long time.
Yes.
Made sense when we were way up there, 400 or 500 cases. But now we're down, we're 100. When are we going to see a drop from the red to the next lower one?
Right, so it follows those two metrics, the case rate and the PCR positivity. I'm hopeful, we'll see how things go this week, next week. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to push it down further just by seeing less number of positive cases occurring in our county.
I guess I just think a reasonable person may say, if the rates are 400, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah,
That's
it was
red.
very high. When it was
But if
red before, it was very high red.
That's down to 100,
Yeah.
and we're saying the rate's still
Yeah.
red.
And
That's
this
a
is
lot.
kind of a national picture that nationally, actually, we're still declining here locally. Nationally, things have seemed to plateau a bit in terms of the case rates nationally. Unfortunately, they're plateauing in mostly that red high rate of transmission. And so this is part of what has us concerned as we head into the holidays and head into all the family gatherings and travel that tends to happen at this time of year, is that nationally we're plateauing in our rates, but we're plateauing at a very high rate. Hopefully, we'll continue to decrease here locally, though, as more and more people get vaccinated, and certainly the natural immunity that people have developed from having had COVID infection in the past few months, the high number of cases that we have, is probably contributing to this as well.
All right, well, last thing I'll say, after the county fair and the Oyster Festival, I would have expected a spike.
Yeah, well, we did
All
have...
those people were together, and it seems like we're declining.
Well, we did increase. We were increasing for most of September and some part of October as well.
Okay.
So, yeah, we are seeing a decline, fortunately.
Thank you.
Because of the things that I mentioned.
Sorry to jump in again. We will let you get through your presentation, but one other question right now. Are we tracking hospitalizations or deaths or COVID statistics for people who have not been vaccinated but who
Yes.
have previously had COVID?
Yeah, we have had multiple reinfections of COVID, especially in individuals who had COVID in the beginning of the pandemic, for example, or in the earlier months of the pandemic, as we're now dealing with this additional surge from Delta. Natural immunity, as I've talked about before, we do think that having COVID infection lends in some people to a strong, robust natural immunity. The challenge, though, with that natural immunity is that it varies from person to person. It's not very reliable in terms of how long it will last and how robustly it will last. We've even heard from recent science that children in particular, or individuals who've had mild or asymptomatic infection, some of them may not even be mounting as much of a natural immunity type of response as we would like to see with somebody who's been infected. So all of these unknowns and variables about natural immunity, that's partly why we're encouraging individuals who've had COVID infections to still go ahead and get their natural immunity boosted with the vaccine series. Because we know, especially for those individuals who've had natural infection and then go on to get vaccine, that their immunity is very robust and hopefully will last a longer time and be able to weather whatever kind of variants we see ahead of us.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. We go to the next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry, yes, the age one. So this is the graph we've been following in terms of looking at age groups, and in particular that blue line, the light blue line for that 0 to 19, the children. And fortunately, we're seeing all of these age groups really decline as we see our community-wide transmission decline as well.
Do we know if the transmission in kids, if that's happening in the school? Have we contact traced that to be within the school, or is it happening
Yeah, so we're
outside?
still doing contact tracing, and contact tracing does indicate that there are several kinds of high-risk exposures happening in school or school-associated type situations. For example, buses and cafeterias, youth sports, other extracurricular type of events like dances and so forth. We're most concerned, it's difficult with disease investigation, outbreak investigation. It's very difficult to only point to one definite exposure.
Right.
This isn't like a food safety issue where you have food poisoning from a ham. So what we do is we identify what may have been different types of high-risk exposures, and you start noticing trends. And when you start noticing trends, you start identifying outbreaks. And when you have a situation where there's a whole school outbreak, where you may have multiple smaller outbreaks within that school, that is usually reliably an indicator of transmission occurring in a school setting or school-associated setting, like a extracurricular event or a bus or something like that. So we have seen those high-risk exposures. It's difficult to say 100% that it came from that one bus or that it came from that one event or whatever, but because we see multiple cases associated with something, it's, we can reliably predict that there's transmission happening in school settings. So yes, we are seeing transmission based on that contact tracing. But these kids live in communities, they live in families. Many of the children may not be vaccinated yet, or they live in families where there's members of the family who are not vaccinated, or they're mingling in the community in environments where there may be some high-risk exposure. And so, in a setting of a community where there's high transmission and where people are doing higher risk activities or they're around people who are not vaccinated, there's even a higher risk of acquiring COVID and then introducing that COVID into a school situation. Go to the next slide, please. So if you look at our 7-day new case rate by vaccination status, we're still seeing that the majority of cases of COVID-19 are occurring in individuals who are not vaccinated, not fully vaccinated. And the risk of COVID infection is much greater in individuals who are not fully vaccinated than in those who are fully vaccinated. Fortunately, both of these trend lines are declining, as we are expected to see. Decline as you get community transmission decreasing, you start to see decrease in transmission in both those not fully vaccinated and fully vaccinated individuals. Go to the next slide, please. COVID hospitalizations as well are on the decline, although of course, we've blurped up a little bit in the past couple weeks, and so we're keeping an eye on that. But fortunately, that seems to be reflecting the decline in transmission we've had over the past handful of weeks. Go to the next slide, please. And then also hospitalizations by vaccine status. So again, here, look at the trend. The trend, more even so than week by week. But the trend is indicating that the majority of hospitalizations, when they occur in COVID-infected individuals, are happening in individuals who have not been vaccinated or are not fully vaccinated. And if you delve into that a little bit further on the next slide, it breaks it down by age and immunization status. And of course, older individuals who naturally have a higher risk of hospitalization have been the lion's share of individuals who've been hospitalized, and especially if they've been not fully vaccinated, which is the darker blue color. Go to the next slide. And this also reflects, for those individuals who have been fully vaccinated and have a breakthrough hospitalization, that really tends to be happening more in individuals who are 60 and older, although there's been a good number, less than 10, but still a good number in that 50 to 59, 40 to 49 age group. Okay, next slide, please. And we are currently at 168 St. Mary's County residents who've had a COVID-related fatality. And an additional nearly 40 non-residents who have died in St. Mary's County tied to COVID.
And this is, what's the data on this as far as time? When did it start?
This is since the beginning of the
160
pandemic.
When was that?
March of last year.
March of last year?
2020, yep.
18 months.
Yeah. I will say that in the last few months, specifically with this Delta surge, we've had probably around 30 or over 30 fatalities related to COVID, just in the past few months.
In the last 3 months since the summer?
Yeah, I haven't calculated the total number in my head, but it's somewhere around there. Actually, the next chart will show it to you a little bit better. If you go to the next slide, please. That actually shows it by month, the number of fatalities that we've had. And so you can see we've pretty much done about 30, there's been about 30 fatalities or more just between August and October. This does not count the fatalities we've had so far in November. Go to the next slide, please. I put this in here because this is kind of points to some of the discussion we were having earlier, and Commissioner Hewitt, you raised a really good point about looking at metrics and what our transmission rates are. And I had brought up the point about we're entering in the holidays, and from our prior experience and from what we expect with this virus, we do expect that there will be some surge related to the activities in the next few months, and then also related to colder weather and people moving indoors. I think one of the things that we're really watching very closely, because it tends to predict what's going to happen in the U.S., is what's happening across seas in the U.K. And in other European countries. Because right now, they're experiencing an upswing in cases that's very concerning about another surge happening in Europe. Their colder weather tends to start a little earlier than ours. They are also seeing, at least in the UK, they're seeing about 10% of their cases related to a new variant, a variant that's kind of a child of Delta, or Delta Plus as they call it. And that is something that we've already seen a presence of Delta Plus here in the US and even here in Maryland. So we're watching that very closely, and certainly I think keeping a very close eye on what's going on in Europe, and not letting down our guard, so to speak, even as our cases are declining here on a weekly basis. I think it's really important for people to keep in mind that this pandemic isn't over yet. We are still getting more and more people vaccinated. We're still working on getting treatments available, and we're entering into a season where we have previously seen a surge in cases. So if people can continue to be cautious, and enjoy their families, enjoy their holidays, but please continue to take some basic precautions, so we don't so we try to mitigate any future surges that might come our way.
So on this chart, the one that really jumps out to me is India, in that it seems incredibly low. And a couple months back, I was watching some reports out of there, and
with the Delta,
at the time, the government was somewhat covering it up, and it seems very strange that they would be this low. Did they really just turn on their vax program incredibly, or what?
They have increased vaccinations, from my understanding. I don't know all the intricacies of their public health response, but they also had a large number of people infected during their Delta surge. That was the first place that we really saw Delta surging around the world, and with large swaths of people being infected, you are going to expect some natural immunity happening in the months afterwards, even though that natural immunity does wane and it varies from person to person. We do think that contributes some level of protection as you then kind of follow their cases after that. But also, testing is a major piece of things, right? Is access to testing. They have billions of people in India, and many living in very remote areas where there's no access really to healthcare resources or testing resources. And so if you're not able to get testing done, then you're not able to identify when cases are happening.
Okay.
If you move to the next slide, please. So COVID-19 testing, the main update here is that we've now expanded rapid PCR testing because of the lower number of cases and our lower testing demand, we've been able to expand access to the rapid PCR testing that we have at the health department by appointment to any resident who has symptoms of COVID-19 or is an identified close contact of a COVID-positive case. So for those rapid PCR tests, we do need people to call in advance because the appointments do fill up, usually at the beginning of the day. So please call in advance to schedule that. Go to the next slide, please. Lots of updates on our website. I'll talk about a few of those on the next slide. The main one since we last met that I think our community has gotten the message about, but that there are additional vaccines now approved for additional doses or booster doses. So I think when we last met, we were talking mainly about Pfizer. We were right before the news about Moderna and Johnson & Johnson and the expansion of Pfizer. So now really anybody, for Moderna Pfizer recipients, anybody who was, just like before, 12 and older, has some level of immune compromise, we do recommend a third dose. And then even after that third dose, they would then go get a booster dose 6 months after that. The third dose is intended to try to get them to the same level of immunity that other people who are not immune compromised might get with their just 2 doses. And then for everyone who is 65 and older who had Moderna or Pfizer, we were recommending that they go ahead and get a booster dose if they're 6 months after their second dose. And then 18 and older individuals. Right now, what's approved for Moderna Pfizer recipients is 18 and older with certain high-risk health conditions. That could include just being overweight, and then also, or being in a high-risk setting, such as a school or retail environment or restaurant or grocery store, that kind of thing. This right now is under review to be expanded even more broadly. And so for Pfizer vaccine, right now the FDA's advisory committee is reviewing whether or not they will expand the booster authorization to everyone 18 and older, like they have in some other countries across the world.
If somebody chooses not to get a booster, will they be considered unvaccinated?
Yeah, national standards right now, you are fully vaccinated if you've completed your primary series. And your primary series would be 2 doses of Moderna Pfizer or 1 dose of Johnson & Johnson. And you're 2 weeks out from that second dose. So that's nationally what's considered fully vaccinated. In our local data web pages, when we say unvaccinated, we're referring to people who have not received that primary series. That may change in the future. I can't predict that, but right now that's what the national standards are. For Johnson & Johnson, this is new too. So all Johnson & Johnson recipients, if you remember, Johnson & Johnson was a 1-dose vaccine. So all Johnson & Johnson recipients are now recommended to get a second dose of that Johnson & Johnson vaccine at least 2 months after that first dose. Also, I think Commissioner Colvin, you had raised this at a prior meeting about this mixing matching kind of concept. So that's also been authorized too. So if you've had Johnson & Johnson vaccine, you can go ahead and get your second dose with one of the other vaccines if you want, the Moderna or Pfizer. If you had Pfizer, you can go ahead and get Moderna, for example, as your other as your booster dose. So individuals can choose any of those 3 vaccines for that additional booster dose. Go to the next slide, please. Also new, since we last met, the Pfizer vaccine approved now for ages 5 to 11. I think the key here is that it's the same active ingredient as what we see with the Pfizer vaccine that we use for the 12 and older population. The reason why it's packaged differently, it's in an orange bottle instead of a purple bottle. The reason why it's packaged differently is because we have to do a smaller amount, so we dilute it differently. And so it's the same active ingredient as what's been fully authorized by the FDA for that 16 and older group. But the dose is 1/3 of the dose that we use for 12 and older individuals. This is not because of the weight of a child, this is because of the maturity of their immune system and how well their immune system mounts an antibody response And the clinical trials have demonstrated that even 1/3 of the dose was sufficient to mount a highly effective antibody response in that 5 to 11 age range. That the effectiveness of that 1/3 of the dose in that 5 to 11 age range is very similar to the effectiveness of triple the dose in that 12+ age range. The doses, it's still 2 doses, 3 weeks apart, so it still takes 5 weeks for a child to get to that full vaccinated status, and the protection from both doses is important. And also the vaccines come with smaller syringes and needles that we use, of course, for those smaller arms.
So I had someone reach out to me about reports of an increased risk of myocarditis in kids who get the vaccine. Is there anything to back that up? Is that happening?
Yeah, I think, so thank you for raising that. This is a really important question, and I want parents who may be watching to know that I really delved into this a little bit in a recent virtual information session that our agency conducted about a week or a week and a half ago. That was a live information session where we answered questions, where I talked about myocarditis and myocarditis risk. It's recorded. It's available on the St. Mary's County Health Department YouTube channel. It's also in the history of our Facebook page as well. So anybody who's interested in more kind of a detailed information on this and other questions about safety and effectiveness about this 5 to 11 vaccine, I would really encourage them to check that out. We're also doing some written FAQs on this that will soon be available on our website as well, hopefully in the next couple of days. And then also on our website, we have some additional links specifically on the topic of myocarditis. So I'll try, I went into more detail in the info session, but I'll try to summarize a little bit here. I think the key thing to keep in mind is that when we rolled out this COVID vaccine in this country, we did so under the most extensive safety monitoring system we have ever utilized for vaccine in the United States. And it's a collaboration between private sector and public sector partners in the safety monitoring system. This extensive safety monitoring system picked up some slightly increased signals of myocarditis in certain people who were vaccinated, specifically with the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine, the mRNA vaccine. That signal, there's been so much data analysis and review and study of those cases that were picked up by this extensive system. And what they determined was that vaccine-related myocarditis. So actually, just to start from the beginning, so myocarditis is just inflammation of the heart. And that inflammation of the heart is usually in reaction to something. It can be in reaction to medication, toxins. It could be in reaction to a vaccine. It most often is in reaction to things like actual viral infections or other types of infections that people can get. What they were looking for was vaccine-related myocarditis. And what they did find was that there was a slightly increased occurrence of vaccine-related myocarditis. But it was still a very rare event, in the order of 20 to 30 cases per million doses that were being administered. It tended to happen more within the first week after the second dose. It tended to happen more in adolescent males and young adult males. And the theory behind that is that there's that testosterone and higher levels of testosterone was contributing to why that myocarditis is happening. And that's why we see lower rates of myocarditis in younger age group, like that 5 to 11 age group. And so because of that, we've certainly been looking specifically at what else may be contributing to it. Also, the myocarditis that's happening thus far related to COVID vaccine, has been much milder and lower risk of happening than the myocarditis that we have been seeing occurring with COVID infection, right? So people getting infected with COVID also have a risk of developing myocarditis. That's infection-related myocarditis. That tends to be more severe. And in children in particular, we're also concerned about this inflammation syndrome, or MIS-C, that can happen in children even weeks after having had COVID infection, even in children who've had mild or infection with COVID. And that MIS-C, the myocarditis that's happening with MIS-C, also tends to be much more severe than the vaccine-related myocarditis that's been seen. There have been no deaths associated with the vaccine-related myocarditis that we've seen. There have been some individuals who had vaccine, who had myocarditis, and who died, but their death was not associated with the vaccine-related myocarditis. Maybe they had an injury or something else that happened. And they're still, of course, monitoring all of this, and any cases that come up, they delve into it. The vast majority, I think about 90+% of cardiologists, heart doctors that have been taking care of these patients who've had vaccine-related myocarditis have indicated that their patients have fully resolved or probably resolved their symptoms within 3 months of having that myocarditis. So again, mostly mild infection that has resolved fairly quickly and is less severe and less impactful on the rest of the body than other myocarditis that's happening with COVID infection or happening with that MIS-C syndrome. And again, a very rare occurrence. When you roll out vaccine to tens of millions of people, you're going to see some of these very rare occurrences happen. And then the other thing to keep in mind is that when these vaccines, including the 5 to 11 vaccine, which has just been rolled out, was reviewed, the safety and this topic of myocarditis was reviewed very, very carefully by an independent advisory committee of private sector scientific and medical experts, as well as medical and scientific experts from the government sector. And that these bodies, these review bodies, were looking very closely at all of this data and discussing it. And their determination has been, especially that advisory committee of immunization practices, that the benefits of getting vaccine in that 5 to 11 age group significantly outweigh any potential risks of these extremely rare adverse events like myocarditis. And the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Academy of Family Physicians, organizations with physicians who take care of children, have also very strongly supported utilization of this vaccine in the 5 to 11 age group. Go to the next slide, please. So one of the questions we've been having is where can 5 to 11-year-olds get vaccine? We have vaccines available through our health department. Written consent through our electronic appointment registration process is needed for that. And there's various mechanisms. We're doing the drive-through vaccine style like we've done with the 12 and older group. This week we're in the schools doing on-site school-located clinics. And starting this Sunday, we're going to have a couple of what we're calling VaxFest events, where it's vaccine in kind of a seated indoor environment, but we'll have some outdoor fun, so parents have something to distract their kids with right after they go get their vaccine. We do have several local primary care offices as well that are carrying pediatric vaccine. Some of them have not rolled out access to the vaccine they have in their offices just yet, but I think a couple of them have already started. So it's important for patients who are looking for a vaccine, if they would rather get it done in a doctor's office, to go ahead and call their doctor and find out if they're carrying that 5 to 11 pediatric vaccine.
So some pediatricians are?
Yes, some pediatricians and family medicine offices.
Okay.
Because they both see children.
Yep.
And then also there's several local pharmacies as well that are carrying the 5 to 11 vaccine. And there's some links here where people can find all that. I think Dr. Simlot, who I've talked about before, the allergy immunology specialist, who we've worked with before to get vaccine access for individuals who've had severe allergies, his office is also carrying vaccine, that 5 to 11 age group of vaccine. So his patients are able to call and schedule that as well. The next slide is, this is just the Vaccine Fest or VaxFest event that we have coming up on Sunday. First, it's Sunday afternoon from 12 to 4. There's many partners who are working together with us to have this event and to try to make a more relaxed, fun environment for families as they are dealing with getting a vaccine for their child. Again, the vaccine will be indoors, the activities will be outdoors, and we'll also have an Ask a Doc booth where we have some local community physicians who'll be available on site to answer questions if families have them about the vaccine. And the last slide. Again, we're encouraging people to go to our website to register for vaccine if they want to get it through the health department mechanisms, or to find out more information about vaccine. They can also call our number, and we'll provide that as well. Commissioners, I just want to close, unless you have other questions, I'm happy to answer, but I did want to close and just acknowledge that you all made an incredibly impactful decision a couple weeks ago when you determined and decided to designate funding to support renovation of that behavioral health hub facility, the PNC Bank that was donated to this county to use as a behavioral health crisis stabilization service. And I really just want to, I think, on behalf of so many partners in this whole community, thank you for your leadership and your foresight. This pandemic has created so much stress in many ways, as we all know, and the behavioral health impact of this pandemic is significant. We definitely are concerned about mental health and substance use. We were concerned about mental health and substance use long before the pandemic. That's always been a public health issue of significant concern, and especially in this community where we have lower access to providers for behavioral health. But certainly this pandemic has aggravated that, as it has for most communities across the country. So I think getting this facility prepared, and then hopefully in the future operational, we'll apply for grants. We look forward to whatever opioid restitution funds can continue to support operations of this building. And once we get it operational, we're so eager to get an expansion of behavioral health services available to our counties. I think it'll be such a critical part of the behavioral health healthcare system here in the county. So thank you.
Well, we see this hub as a very important thing for the county over and above the COVID-19.
Yeah.
We see it as a future, especially for those who are addicted, needing help.
Yeah.
And so all those things will fall into place. And plus, getting our rural areas a little better access, as you mentioned about the hub we just did down in the
Yeah, absolutely. And
Spring Ridge area, where eventually the general public will also be able to come in there. And that's sort of an underserved area down through there. So we understand that. We want to make sure everything's... And we want to send people back into production in our county, hopefully cured of some of this opiate production.
I thank you so much. I think, I know there's been discussion of behavioral health for a long time now. Our entire county is a health professional shortage area for mental health. And our community partners in the private sector who are providing behavioral health services, there's always been this gap that people be able to go somewhere for immediate access and get some initial stabilization so they can then get connected to the private sector behavioral health treatment resources that we have available in our county. And so this will be an incredible piece of the continuum of health and well-being for our residents, and will really add a tremendous amount in averting poor outcomes from behavioral health crisis. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your work on this.
Dr. Rooster, thank you. We're happy to help. Could you enlighten me, if you could, what happened to the term and usage of herd immunity?
Yeah, great question. So herd immunity is something we've always talked about in infectious disease, public health, especially when you have a new agent, is that when you get enough people immune, either through vaccine-related immunity or natural immunity, that high level of community-wide protection then protects those individuals who may not be able to develop immunity, maybe because they have immune compromise or because they don't have access or they're not eligible for vaccines. And by that level of herd immunity, you also, the impact of that is that you decrease all the infection in a community, and so it's kind of like developing a shield around your whole community, protecting even those people who aren't immune. So early in the pandemic, of course, it's a new virus. That's the definition of the pandemic there, is that it's a new agent. We're continually learning. We were trying to predict what level or percentage of population immune would be needed to reach this herd immunity level. This is still something we haven't identified. We haven't been able to identify exactly what percentage, and most of the time that's difficult to identify anyways when you're this early in dealing with a pandemic or a virus. And what's especially especially complicating the situation here, is that we've been seeing waning immunity in people, both individuals who are naturally infected as well as individuals who, of course, have been getting vaccine-related immunity. So that is complicating the picture. The other thing complicating the picture is that as infection continues to rage on across the world, there's more and more mutations of this virus happening that are creating new strains. And some of these new strains are more contagious against even the vaccines or natural immunity that's already been established. And so because of that, we're kind of, at one point I called it like whack-a-rona or whack-a-mole kind of approach here. So it may be a while before we get to an outcome like what we want to see or what we've always thought would happen with herd immunity because of the changing virus, changing immunity, and we just haven't had enough people develop immunity, either through vaccine or natural infection, to get us to that community-wide shield that we want to develop.
Thank you. It just seems weird. We talked about it all the time, then all of a sudden it just sort of faded away.
Yeah. I mean, we're still talking about it. In scientific circles, we're still talking about it. But I think people are recognizing that because of the way this virus is structured, which is pretty unique, the fact that you have all this asymptomatic spread and you have, all of that we've been monitoring and learning about the virus, that we're not there. And the level of immunity, combination of vaccine and natural and lasting immunity that we would need at the community level is probably greater than the 60% sometimes we were estimating in the beginning of the pandemic. It's probably much higher than that.
Thank you.
I had just a few comments. And before I start, let me say, I think you're doing an excellent job.
Thank you,
I'm
sir.
a pro-vaccine, and for anybody who hasn't had a vaccine, get your vaccine. We're seeing the effects of that. But I have 6 grandchildren, and it's not about me. But I often worry about this term that was used, warp speed, on this testing, and I have a son who's a scientist, and the point is, it's not about him, but it's usually 5 to 7 years of testing that they do to see if there's any what's the term, side effects or things like that come about. So when we start talking about 5 to 11-year-olds, and we know this was a population that was statistically not impacted by the COVID 19, say that the older population or the more immune-compromised population was. It just worries me. Now, you said some metrics, and I just want to go over this a little bit. You said 20 to 30 million doses. Is that how many kids have been?
No. When I said 20 to 30, I was referring to the number of vaccine-related myocarditis cases in 1 million doses. So 20 to 30 cases out of about a million vaccine doses.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood it. And then you said weight. Now, I have I know some 5-year-olds that weigh 40, 45 pounds, and some 9-year-olds that weigh 80, 85 pounds.
Yeah. So what I was saying with weight is that weight does not factor into the decision to do a third of the dose for the 5 to 11-year-olds. The deciding factor in the dosage for the 5 to 11-year-olds was not weight. It was the way the immune system functions in that age group. So in that age group of 5 to 11, the immune system tends to have a pretty robust response to the vaccine. And so what they found is that they didn't need the full dose that they were using in the 12 and older population to get to that same level of protectiveness that they had with the 12 and older population. That a third of the dose was working just fine in that age group. And that's why that third of the dose was authorized. But it was not based on weight. So you could have a 50-pound kid, you could have a 100-pound kid. If they're in that 5 to 11 age group, based on the trials and what we know about our immune systems and so forth, they're going to have that robust immune response to the vaccine at a third of the dose, similar to the kind of immune response that we've seen to the full dose in the 12 and older population.
Okay. You used the term, so much study has been done. And I guess my sense of that is of course, when this thing, popped up 18 months to 2 years ago, hey, there was a lot of study being done. And Lord knows it was something that overtook this world and had to be addressed right away. Totally support that. When you say so much study has been, that's on the 5 to 11, there's so much study has been done on that age group?
So we have vaccinated now in this country over 11 million adolescents with the same vaccine, with the same active ingredient.
Adolescents 5 to 11.
No, 12 and older. Adolescents 12 to 17. Over 11 million have now been vaccinated, and doses have been administered, and they've been monitored for several months. And the clinical trials with that age group involved several thousand residents as well, who've now been monitored for even longer than when we made the vaccine available to the public. The clinical trials for that 5 to 11 age group also had several thousand children involved who've been monitored for several months before they got to making the vaccine publicly available. And again, that's the same active ingredients, and it's at a third of the dose. So those collectively, when you look at the numbers of people that have participated in clinical trials, and you look at the millions of people that have thus far received the vaccine through public access, and have gone through, as I mentioned, the most extensive safety monitoring system we've ever had with vaccines in this country for several months now. It's been almost a year now that these vaccines have been available. That's what I was referring to in terms of there's been many people who have now received the same kind of vaccine that we're now making available to those 5 to 11-year-olds.
Again, I support this whole idea of trying to get this vaccine out there and getting this pandemic under control. You mentioned something that someone's reached out to me and is concerned about, is the small number. You say several thousand. That sounds like a lot. I recently read, someone referred me to an article that they talked about 2,500 children.
It's actually closer to 4,000, 4 or
What'd you say
5,000.
now?
It's closer to 4 or 5,000 in the clinical trials for the Pfizer 5 to 11 age
Okay,
group.
the one I read said 2,500. Anyway, point is, that seems like a small segment when you're talking to millions of children. 2,500. I'm not asking you to make a decision on that. I just want you to tell you that personally, I feel that, this is fast. Hopefully it's effective. Hopefully there's no side effects. But the last thing I'll ask you is the number of COVID infections of 5 to 11-year-olds.
Yeah, it's about 2 million in
What'd
the
you say?
country. About 2 million in the country so far of COVID infections in that 5 to 11 age group. There's about 6.3 million total
So
children.
they're testing them in school. How does a 5-year-old get tested?
Same way the 5-year-old gets tested here in the county. They might go to their health department, they might go to their doctor's office or an urgent care. Some schools might have testing available as well. So there's many mechanisms for having testing in the community, just like we have here in St. Mary's County. So a 5-year-old can go get tested just like a 30-year-old.
I was just down in Disney World with my grandchildren. Wonderful experience. And down there in that Florida county or whatever it's called, they're getting rid of masks, because they're doing along the lines of if your child's been vaccinated, or if it's not been vaccinated, get the testing, and if you're vaccinated. I know you talked about this Vax Fest. Now, that is not a school-related event.
We're partnering with the school system because we're holding it at Great Mills High School.
But the point is, it's health department initiated, isn't that true?
Yes, that's correct. We're partnering, we have many partners. We've been working with the County Department of Emergency Services, County Department of Public Works. We've been partnering with the Sheriff's Office, and a variety of community partners have been helping us, including our EMS system here locally.
Okay, but again, it's focused on the 5 to 11-year-olds.
Yes, that's correct. So I think that's, raises another point, and I think to go back to a question that you had asked about earlier, Commissioner, is that how are we ensuring that we're getting the right dose into the right kid? And so when you have you have a variety of healthcare entities in this county that are making vaccine available to that 5 to 11 age group, and as they have been, many of them have been already for the 12 and older age group. Their mission is, of course, health and well-being for the residents here locally, and of utmost importance, I am heartily am confident in, is of utmost importance to our healthcare providers here in this county is the safety and well-being of our children, including those in that 5 to 11 age group. And so as this is what we do in healthcare. We implement procedures and protocols, and we do that with safety in mind, and we do that so that there aren't mistakes made in that process of getting vaccine to the right person and at the right dosage, or whatever else the intervention is. And we are constantly evaluating those safety procedures to find out ways that we can improve them. And when you are rolling out and you have a network of many, many different vaccine providers across this country, and you're implementing millions and millions and millions of vaccine doses across this country, just like with any system, there may be mistakes that happen. And in a time of COVID, where this is the major issue of our times, most likely in many minds, and you have the availability and access to things like social media, when a mistake happens in that extensive network of providers that are doing millions and millions of doses, it will make national headlines, really. And so people hear about it and so forth. And of course, that raises the question about safety and so forth, and making sure the system is better. So anytime those things happen, I think healthcare providers across the country reevaluate and relook at their processes to see where is an opportunity for improvement. Our providers here in the county, I'm sure, are doing that as well. I can speak to the St. Mary's County Health Department in particular in terms of our procedures and processes. As you know, we've been the main vaccine provider in this county for months now, and so we've done tens of thousands of vaccine doses, and I think through that, many months of that, we've really developed strong procedures. We've had multiple opportunity to continually reevaluate the process and try to make it better, especially as new things develop, such as this 5 to 11 type of vaccine. I can speak to some of the things that we're doing here locally to make sure that vaccine is getting into the right arm at the right dosage. First of all, the 5 to 11 vaccine comes in a different vial than the 12 and older vaccine. So it's an orange color versus a purple color. So that helps us as vaccinators to make sure there's not mixing of those two different types of vaccine stash. The second thing that we do is we only vaccinate people who have had their appointment made in our PrepMod registration system. We've been using this pretty much since the beginning of rolling out vaccine, and there are specific ways that system will detect when you register somebody who's in that 5 to 11 age group to make sure that there's a written consent provided by the parent or legal guardian who's doing the registration for the vaccine. And at our vaccine sites, we have specific and our most experienced vaccinator staff, medication draw-up staff, who are drawing up that 5 to 11 vaccine. If we have both vaccines, which I'll explain in a moment, we typically don't, we will have different groups of people or different persons handling the different vaccines so that there's not a mixing of the vaccine. At our drive-through site and our community clinics where parents are accompanying the children, then there's at least 3 points of verification of identity through multiple questions. Obviously, kids don't walk around in this age group with IDs, but parents do have IDs. Parents can answer questions. Kids can answer questions depending on their age about their date of birth and where they live, all of those. So we have multiple ways of verifying identity during that process. At our school-located clinics where parents aren't there, such as the vaccine clinics that we're doing this week in the schools, we coordinate very closely with the school system. We actually closed registrations for this week last week because we needed enough time to communicate with the school system well and make sure we all were ironing out those processes. We communicate with the school system. The school system nurse and the school teachers work to verify the identity of the child based on name, date of birth, and the other elements from that consent system. They then use name tags for the child before they even go to the vaccine clinic area. When they are escorted by the school to the vaccine clinic area, the child then goes through 3 additional points of identity verification. That involves identifying full name, date of birth, and some other elements from their registration, such as name of parent, name of street that they live on. If there's any question of identity in this process, we call the parent. I was at the schools yesterday doing vaccine, and I called and spoke with some parents as well when there was any question. And we have the parent actually talk to the child so we can hear that conversation and they recognize each other. We may even do video calls, virtual calls. Again, if there's any question, we do that effort first. If we're not able to reach a parent when there's a question, or if we're not satisfied by that interaction, or the parent isn't sure, then we just don't vaccinate. And we send a note home with the child saying they were registered, we didn't vaccinate, and here's other options for where you can come in person with your child to get them vaccinated. So those are some procedures we use. The other major procedure that we do is we separate out the 5 to 11 age group. So as you referenced when you were talking about the VaxFest event, that is only for 5 to 11-year-olds. We are not doing vaccine for that 12 and older age group at that event. We've only had one event thus far. It was a drive-through day where we had both the 5 to 11 vaccine and the 12 and older Pfizer vaccine. And because we did it through our drive-through where we have multiple lanes, we designated certain lanes for that 12 and older group and then certain lanes for the 5 to 11 group. The vaccine that were in the lanes for the 5 to 11 group was only the 5 to 11 vaccine. The vaccine in the lanes for the 12 and older group was only the 12 and older vaccine. And so that way there wasn't any mixing of the vaccine. If a car that came through on that date had a 12 and older person who was also getting vaccine, as well as the 5 to 11-year-olds, they were always sent to the 5 to 11 lanes because we wanted to make sure that there wouldn't be the potential of an adult dose being given to a child in that age group. And the vaccine for the 12 and older person was actually held by a person who came specifically for that purpose, just to hold that 12 and older vaccine in their hand so it didn't get mixed in with any of the 5 to 11 vaccines. So we have very well, I think, thought out processes for safety to make sure the right dose goes in the right arm. Of course, as I was talking about before, when you're doing millions upon millions in a vast, diverse network of vaccination providers across the country, mistakes do happen. And it's really important that we learn from those mistakes, from the ones that our partners or others are creating across the country, and learn from those situations and relook at our processes, and we do that on a regular basis.
You're doing a great job.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Anything else, Commissioners?
No.
Nothing new? I know you talk about this herd immunity.
Okay.
I'm sure that we talk about that all the time with the flu shot. We've been getting that for so many years. I suppose we've reached that plateau there. When do you think we'll be reaching a plateau of herd immunity with this coronavirus? I mean, we've been into it for 20 months now.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I suppose continuing to mandate mask wearing and things like that for our people has really become.
Yeah, I wish I had that magic 8-ball answer.
I got to admit, eventually, I know if we get everybody immune shots, that would help out.
Yeah.
But there's going to be those that will not. I had a
Sure, yeah, and as I talked about when Commissioner Morgan had asked that question before, there's some complications here in the sense that we've now had multiple variants come out from this virus. We are seeing some waning immunity, both natural immunity and vaccine-related immunity. So that definitely complicates the picture of when we can get to herd immunity. We're also seeing that this virus is pretty hardy. It spreads very easily. It's being spread not just through respiratory droplets, but aerosolized, so the likelihood of spread in a community is pretty significant. And so I don't have an answer to percentages. This is something we talked about earlier as well, that, in our experience with other infectious agents, sometimes it's 60-70%. With this virus, maybe it'll be much higher than that. But again, that herd immunity would be a combination of longer lasting immunity from both natural infection and vaccine-related immunity.
I believe we're going to live with this forever.
Yeah, I think that's to be expected.
We'll be getting it for those who want the shot. We'll be getting the shot every year, just like the flu shot.
Maybe. That's still to be seen. We're certainly monitoring all that.
Now, just like the flu, it's always breaking out different
Yeah,
variants.
the flu was a pandemic, it became endemic, and then we deal with new strains every year, and so the vaccine changes a little bit every year to deal with the new strains. We might be dealing with that with COVID. I think it's a little too early to say at this point, but certainly, I think we'll be able to get to a place where this virus is what we call endemic, not pandemic. That's going to be really important, because while this virus is still pandemic, we're constantly dealing with mutations of the virus and the implications and impact of that.
That's the main thing. Everybody out there, please get your shot.
Please, yes.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Thank you,
Anything else,
Commissioners.
Commissioners?
All right, I move to adjourn as the St. Mary's County Board of Health and reconvene as the Commissioners of St. Mary's County.
Second.
Have a first and second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you,
Thank you,
Dr. Brewster,
Commissioners.
very much for your time. Great reception, everybody. It was very nice. Very nice. Okay, next we're going to move right into county administrator time.
Thank you, Commissioner Guy. First on your county administrator agenda is your draft meeting agendas. So we'll go over November 30th and December 7th. Just a note, there is no commissioner meeting next week because of Thanksgiving. November 30th, you begin your business meeting with a joint meeting with the St. Mary's County Board of Education here in this room. You have two commendations that morning for Mr. Johnson's retirement and Ms. Grove's retirement. You also have the decision on the electrical code amendments from the Department of Land Use and Growth Management. Also from the Department of Land Use and Growth Management is a request for public hearing for the comprehensive zoning ordinance amendments for solar major and solar minor. Also, a closed session is scheduled for personnel and real property that day. The next week is December 7th. You did approve the public hearing for Department of Land Use and Growth Management for the alcohol beverage production ordinance, and that's scheduled for that morning, and then the Department of Finance will have the FY 2021 audit report. So item B on your agenda this morning is from the Sheriff's Office with the FY23 State Aid for Police Protection application, Part 1, and I believe Major American is present for the agenda item.
Major American, he's out there
I thought
talking.
he was in the lobby.
He's
yes.
there.
We'll see if he can. There he is. Thank you. Hi, Major American.
Dr. B, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Well, Major American, Dr. Brewster got a standing ovation when she left, so we're hoping to see that for you, too.
Welcome, Major American. How you doing?
Mr. Guy, doing good today.
Good.
Today we have an opportunity to discuss, as we do each year, our state aid to local law enforcement. And it's one of the things that the state's giving us money and not hitting us up with unfunded mandates like they always do. So, as you can see, it's consistent with last year's. There is one caveat that hasn't been addressed yet, and that's Governor Hogan's proposal of increasing it by 50%. But again, we don't know what that formula looks like or if that'll even happen. I mean, Annapolis does what Annapolis does, but at least we know this is our bottom line today.
But last year was about 950.
Yep.
And there's potential to go to $1.5 million.
It's potentially there, yes.
That would be nice.
Any questions? I mean, I'll come back in budget work sessions and ask for it back, but
You're nibbling and shy.
We'll see you then.
Well, I move to approve the grant submission for the FY 2023 State Aid for Public Police Protection, SAPP program, Project MD 2330, from the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth and Victim Services, and authorize the Commissioner President and Sheriff to execute the related documents and staff to submit electronically.
Second.
I have a first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That was short and sweet. You're very convincing.
Have a great day, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. And item C is for the YMCA Concept Plan. Our guests today are Robbie Gill, Executive Director of the YMCA of the Chesapeake, and Brian Rigby from GROW. Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning, gentlemen, again.
Morning, how are you, sir?
Very good.
Gentlemen, could you each take a microphone?
Yeah, oh, yes.
Thank you. That would help us.
Can I move it?
You can leave it there and come this way if you'd like.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate just.
Probably needs a computer screen, right? You need to.
Thank you, sir.
There you go. No problem. Well, it's good to see you again. Thank you so much for having us. We've had a strong group with our task force that's been working on analyzing this conceptual design, looking at the two sites, and feel really comfortable with the work that we've done. And so happy to share that information with you today and answer any questions that you may have.
Yes, sir. Great, thank you. My name is Brian Rigby. I'm the Director of Design for GROW Development. Pleasure to be here. I actually live in Annapolis, Maryland, where all the trouble comes from, but do these Ys all over the country. So excited to be in our backyard and bring another great Y to Maryland. So we're going to take a few minutes and just kind of walk through kind of how we got here a little bit, some of the background, some of the vision, because that's, you know, really at the start of the Y, it's really about a mission and a goal, less about the building, and that's hard for an architect to say, but it's true. You know, we're a cause and we're not just a place. But we will also talk about the place today. We'll talk about how we got to the recommendation on the site, as well as some floor plans and imagery that you'll see of what a potential YMCA can be. So the Y is a huge movement. There's about 2,800 buildings across the country. We build about 35 to 40 from my department per year, or at least design them. And there's about 250 undergoing any capital improvement at any given time. So what that means is, as a large organization, we have more Ys than we have Targets or Home Depots. There's a lot of data, and so a lot of the data goes into designing these spaces to find the best locations and also what the best mix of venues and room types are to be able to serve communities. GROW is the de facto facilities department for YUSA, kind of the overarching space. That's all we do. We just do YMCAs. We look at real estate, we look at design, interior design, and facility management. So we've done a lot of these. We've worked with Robbie on a number of Ys. We've worked on Ys with the DC, YMCA, Frederick, Richmond, New York City, Seattle, Alaska, you name it, and kind of been there.
Yeah, so I'll speak briefly to the task force. I mean, I think one of the things you guys should just be grateful for is you just got an incredible group of community members here, just unbelievable in their efforts, and not only working on this, but just collectively in general. And so you had a strong group of volunteers that were involved over a year and 2 years ago with the exploratory committee. And then, of course, we did the market study, which we had tons of participation on with it as well. And then you had the fundraising feasibility study that was so strong. And so when we went out and asked for folks to get involved from a task force standpoint for this conceptual design, we just had a ton of folks that wanted to participate in that. And so you can see we got a good cross-section of folks to represent myself and Brian, obviously, and BJ Dothert, who's the assistant principal at Great Mills High School. Amy hosted our meetings there at the library, which was tremendously beneficial. Sabrina brought her expertise in relation to the base, and then Beverly, who was original exploratory committee member, John Parlett, obviously tremendously resourceful and helpful for us, was on that committee as well. And then having county staff was just imperative. Art Shepard and his support. And then Meadow Swaby, who's a teacher in town, has a wonderful Y story that you should hear, where she grew up in grew up in Jamaica, and the Y had a huge impact on her life. Helped her actually go to college in Toronto and ultimately become an educator. Just a wonderful woman. And then obviously legal counsel with David and his support. We also were fortunate enough to have Captain John Barbazano participate in some meetings as well as Betsy Shays, who is watching on TV today, who's our vice chair of our corporate board, who made the trip over here on 2 different occasions. So we had a dedicated group that attended all the meetings, provided great insight, information. We toured all the sites, physically walked them, talked about pluses and minuses, and so working as a collective group, I feel really good about the product that you'll see today.
So from a typical YMCA development process, this is just kind of part 1B. The first part really being task force creation, the market research, really looking at site, and everything that has to come before we actually start looking at putting pencils to paper. This is what we call pre-funding design. It's kind of tried and true from a nonprofit standpoint that before you commit a couple $1 million to pre-development activities, we need to make sure that the feasibility of this project really works. So we start with what we want, what we need, what it looks like, where it goes on the site, and eventually we get to what it costs to operate, what it costs to build, and what the impact will end up being for that. So we have to have those questions answered to get to pre-funding, at which point we really put our pencils down and we let the funding opportunity catch up, right? In some cases it's partnerships, in some it's private philanthropy, grants, state or local or federal, et cetera. Once we have all that, that's when we can then release a local architecture team. I don't do all of these Ys across the country. We always partner with local architects and contractors so that basically 99% of the resources stays local within that. But we help then guide to make sure that the vision gets translated to the built environment and the final product so that it's as impactful as possible within there. So we're not fully quite baked on schematic design. You're going to see plans and renderings today, but it's by all no means completely finished. We'll take any input we receive today, finalize that, and then really go for that local cost estimate and that pro forma creation. And we will build what the community is willing to support. And I mean, these are community-backed organizations, and we want to make sure that we're serving people, serving communities, and in the way that they want in this area. So we'll start a little bit. Well, I'll breeze through this a little bit with the vision. We'll talk through really at the heart of it, understanding the people, the programs, and the place. The people is who we're serving. The programs are how we serve and deliver them. We can't offer underwater basket weaving if nobody wants to do that, right? So all of this stuff that we're getting into really is community driven, and from that we design a building around that. So we'll talk a little bit about some of these spaces and how they kind of plays into it. So these sources of input, you have seen some of these. The market research is this collection of phone calls and asking folks what they're looking for, where they would like to see a Y built, what types of programs and services that are in there. Community needs assessment are typically done by hospitals, air bases. There's a lot of input that comes into it because we're trying to fill gaps. This is a major thing. We don't, at the YMCA, we're not in the competition market. We build competitors, through fitness, but we're here to fill gaps. We're not here to necessarily compete with entities that are already doing really good work. We're here to prop that up a little bit more. Domain expertise just comes from doing this, day in and day out. I've done about 250 YMCAs at this point in my career. We've made little mistakes on each one, and we don't make them again. So ultimately, this snowball starts to happen, and we get a really good product. The operational expertise is what it takes to run a Y here, not in Hawaii or not in Florida, but in the Chesapeake Bay region, and that comes from Robbie and his team. And the visioning sessions is really hearing from people from the task force and through the community of what we're trying to develop. And there is time for all of this as we get into more detail, into spaces, making sure that our teen spaces actually have teen input into those when we get to points within there. But this is the input that kind of came out of it, and we'll run through just a few key points on the market research of what the community said that they were looking for. So the most important thing was really being a community hub for all ages, right? And an asset for attracting and keeping young families in the area. We talk about Ys becoming third places. It's the place where after home and work, you choose to spend your time. We've actually seen some Ys during the pandemic become second places as people have been working remotely and are choosing to get out of the house because they don't have that second place anymore. So the Y is a place where you can come and spend time with your neighbors, get to know folks, and find an avenue from whatever you're really looking for. Some of the top responses were pools, things for families to do, health and fitness, things for kids and seniors to do. That's often what we see when we just want places that people want to belong to within there. Venues that were high on the list was warm water pools and tracks, walking, jogging track, indoor spaces to have exercise. Warm water pools tend to be where the Y's focus usually is because our focus is really on safety around water as a means to for lifelong exercise, so aqua aerobics, aqua exercise, lap swimming recreationally, and of course if we want to get into competitive swimming, we certainly do that. But safety around water and teaching kids to swim is huge. And I've found, the best opportunity is really in warmer water, shallower, not clinging to a ledge in a 70-degree pool with, your hair turning green, like I was taught to swim at my YMCA. The other thing is really being, not just a place but a cause. So looking at opportunities for gathering and providing senior programs, youth sports, recreation, swim lessons, et cetera. 2 key points on the market research was both sites that we tested about the same in terms of number of membership units. We talk about units, it's basically a household. It could be 2 individuals, it could be 10 individuals, right? 2 parents and 10 kids or whatever. But those are how we kind of target some of these spaces. So we're looking at about 3,500 units, which would be about 8,000 to 10,000 people, members in those spaces. So from that data of what makes a highly performing Y, we average about 11 square feet per membership unit. So if you target somewhere between 10 and 15 square feet per membership unit, that's about the size of the Y that you can sustain from an operational standpoint. And if you're on the higher end of the spectrum, 12, 13, 14, it means you probably have a little bit bigger pools and gyms, which is completely fine. They're not necessarily membership drivers, but they are community assets when you are tight for gym space or when you do want to have, off-site prom nights or something like that. Those are the areas that we start to target being filled. So we're looking at somewhere between a 42 and 48,000 square foot facility. If it gets into the 50 to 55, that's probably not bad. That's actually kind of a sweet spot for about a 4,000 unit YMCA. And we do know from the track record that they do attract young families, seniors, as well as our teens and our youth as well. So we'll talk through the place a little bit in here, how we got to this point. Next slide, please. So the way that we judge sites comes down to 4 different things. And, it kind of starts top down. Number 1 is the market. That's the opportunity to serve and the opportunity to grow. It's how many people live in the county or the town. And that doesn't necessarily change overnight. But it kind of gets us to having the right product of the right size in that area. The next one is synergies and visibility. So how many folks know that we're there? Is there synergies between other like service providers? I always say if you built a Y next to a Chick-fil-A or a Target, you would more than likely knock it out of the park because those are in places that tend to serve similar folks for us. But in some cases, it's also visibility and access from schools or from neighborhoods, et cetera. The last part of this one, in kind of the quantitative parts, are what you can do with the land. Is it hilly? What's it cost to build on? What's the zoning available to do? And lastly is really the goodwill. And that really comes down to good partnerships, with the community to be able to build a great YMCA so that we're going to be there for 50 plus years. So we looked at 2 different options. We looked at the site adjacent to Great Mills Pool by the high school, and we looked at Nicollet Park in here. And so the first one we looked at, Nicollet Park, good visibility, lots of trips on the road, good access to the air base, which is a positive and a negative in certain things, but slightly hidden off the beaten track and in the middle of a neighborhood with not a lot of visibility. It's also a very built-up area, and what I found in my experience in adding YMCAs to existing parks, it's sometimes easier to add another park than it is to take amenities away. So when we look at the market, we can serve about, in a 30-minute drive time, about 65,000 people or about 24,000 households within there. So that starts to check some of the boxes. But in terms of the synergies, access, and visibility, it starts to score a little bit lower just based on the visibility and the adjacency to some of the neighborhoods, as well as just some of the other core businesses that are around there, making it a little bit more challenging for pedestrian traffic to get through there. The site itself is probably where you start to see the lower scores come in, mostly because it's a very hilly site. The area that we would be taking to build the YMCA was more of a flat site, and to be able to do this, unfortunately, one of the key drivers in membership, especially as we're looking at a countywide project, is parking. And so by the number of parking spaces we typically need, it's about 1 space per 200 square feet, would require some reconfiguration of the existing park and potentially some recapturing of existing amenities that are needed and well loved from our work with the task force and looking at that. And you can kind of see all these little green stars that are on the screen. Those are all the hills, the peaks of the hills as you get in there. We looked at some visibility and some other things. And so where we were really looking was kind of the existing ball field and some of the greener areas in there. So it was just getting a little bit tight for us. The Great Mills site, a little bit further down the road, it was really appealing, mostly because of, while it wasn't in the middle of a high retail area, it is smack dab in the middle of 3 schools. And one thing that we've known, we just opened the new Y in Urbana, Maryland, which is in between a high school and a middle school. And somebody asked me the last time we were down here, do high schoolers really go to the Y? And we sat there the next day and watched the bell go off at 2:30, and about 200 high schoolers walk over to the Y, where they spent 3 hours until their parents picked them up later on, which is when you're inundated with 400 kids after school, as Robbie knows, it's a good problem to have, but it forms a pretty interesting couple hours. So we looked at this site and really identified that the 2 things that were really, or 3 things that were really good for us was it was on a well-traveled road. It was in a little bit more of a green site for us, with great proximity to the existing Great Mills pool. As well as the locations between the high school, had this project or this site check out a little bit higher on the scorecard standpoint. So what we did from this one was we ended up doing a site. Next one, please. Yeah, perfect. One more. We started to look at the site and started to do a proof of concept. So we took what rooms of what sizes, that was the program, and we ended up placing the building in a couple of different locations on the site, and really identified the best location for this project was close to the existing Great Mills pool, both from a visibility standpoint, the ability to reuse existing parking areas to complement some new parking that would be in there, and then the possibility that we would actually be creating a new park setting in this very beautiful piece of property, as well as taking advantage operationally of synergies and partnership with the existing aquatics operation in that area. So we took the kind of the bubble diagrams and we started to get into some of the design, which starts to show where some new parking would be. We think the parking would need to be really well thought out, kind of to work within most of the existing tree canopies, so that we're not necessarily just showing a sea of parking, but it is integrated with the landscape within there. The YMCA kind of forms the backdrop to this new plaza that would bridge the existing pool with the YMCA, and then embed the YMCA in this natural setting to be able to provide access from the indoors out and outdoors in, as well as taking advantage of some of the views. So what you start to see on the screen is a progressive approach to a building design where you would walk in on the southeast corner, which is down here for everybody, into a vestibule from that public plaza, looking into a warm water indoor pool that would have a number of lap lanes in there as well for group exercise and lap swimming, but also a splash pad and a teaching area in that zone, in that point. The lobby would feel a little bit more like a hotel or a lounge instead of a DMV. We would want that to be a social gathering hub, kind of that community living room. The spaces that you see in the yellowish orange are our youth development zones. This is for drop-in child watch. And what we know is if we do these spaces right, these become very good places for young families to engage. And we don't want kids aging out of YMCAs where after they turn 4 or 5, they don't want to be there, because we all know if you have young kids or you have grandkids, your 7-year-old kind of makes a decision for you on some of these places on where you want to be. So we want to have a zone that will appeal to a 5 to 9-year-old, as well as places called child watch that are kind of a 0 to 4-year-old location. The areas in red further down the screen are our community venues, and these respond really to just community needs, but also it's kind of your senior center in the morning and your teen center after school. And if you design it the right way, meaning don't put Justin Bieber posters on the wall, it is very appealing. It's kind of a Starbucks, regardless of whether you like their coffee or not. That idea that the design of these spaces should just feel good and not feel too, kid heavy. But we have things like intergenerational rooms, which are, maybe more STEM lab oriented or makerspace oriented, teaching kitchens, multi-purpose rooms. Those are across from a full-size gymnasium, where we would be filling that with pickleball, we'd be filling that with gaga ball, dodgeball, basketball, any kind of games you can think of, and then some of our locker rooms on this floor. The second floor tends to be very adult fitness oriented. The idea for this is that although our YMCA's serve all, they don't have to serve everybody in one corner of the building. So when we put a second floor on this space, not only do we get a little bit more visibility, you get great views from your second floor looking out over this forest, but you also get kind of an adult-centric zone, which means you don't have 100 kids from summer day camp walking through your workout space. And so we would be looking at creating group exercise studios up there. There's 3 of them in this plan that appeal to a wide range, but also start to form connections between our neighbors, a generous sized wellness center with an outdoor fitness terrace on there, and then an indoor walking jogging track on this space. And so this is an artist concept of what those spaces can be. We're not saying that this is what it has to be. We have whys that look like anything you can think of, but the things that kind of play into this are lots of glass, retail oriented, views in, views out, and visibility. For a long time, the YMCA hid kind of our mission behind our walls, and what we've gone to with our more modern designs is really letting people see what we're doing, for youth development, for healthy living, and for social responsibility. So you can see the pool beyond the patio. You can see the visibility between there. You can see the new patio space with indoor-outdoor activities. And then on the second floor, you can see the fitness center that looks out over some of the surrounding trees and some of our play areas in there. This is just another view. We would want to try to keep as many of the groves of trees as possible and some of the natural landscape into this space. And then from our living room, our lobby space, places that our neighbors can gather, places that our neighbors can be. And this is really where you start to see that third place, second place come into fruition. Because one of the themes for a YMCA, and something that we've put greater emphasis on coming out of the pandemic, is this isn't a transaction. This is not swiping your card and jumping on a treadmill for 30 minutes because, let's be honest, you can probably do that at home or somewhere closer to home now. This is a place to be, and we want you to be here for 2 to 3 hours at a time. So places like this where people can gather, grab a snack, get to know their neighbors, go to the pool, then maybe, shower off and hang out in the gym, do an art project, make some t-shirts in some of our multi-purpose room. It really becomes a destination draw for the entire county, and we want that to be, in this zone that we see here. And then if you kind of swing the camera back around, you can see the fitness center on the second floor and some of the visibility between our venues. So this has been done before. This is actually right across the bridge in Chestertown, the Kent County YMCA, that Robbie's got under construction that opens in hopefully end of December.
Yep, end of this year, scheduled to open.
About a 55,000 square foot YMCA, so pretty similar in makeup within there. This is the St. Michael's Y, the Perkins Family Y in there that was built 3 years ago.
Yeah, it opened in 19. It sits on school property. It's also a senior center as well. And so it's a very small community of 4,000 people. Many of those people in the Bay Hundred and St. Michael's areas were isolated and had limited access to Easton. And so over the course of a decade, we worked on a project to partner and collaborate to be able to provide a hub. This is why I know one of the things we saw in there earlier is Brian was saying, penetration rates of 13 to 15%. In Talbot County, it's over 30%. This YMCA is 4 in 5 people that live in that area. So I think what you'll find is in small rural communities, the Y becomes, I call it the front porch of the community. It's a place where everyone connects. And the beauty in that too is as we've talked about on numerous occasions, this is an organization that doesn't turn anyone away, so there's never a financial limitation for anyone to participate. So you're going to literally see everyone there, which is what I love most about the Y.
This is the new Y in Urbana. This is in between a high school and a middle school, just opened in April. So we've actually got some really great Ys in Maryland now if we want to do a tour of some point within there. And then just a couple other examples. This is Lockport, New York. The upper picture should give you an example of some of the spaces. We tend to design spaces that have a lot of openness, a lot of natural light, a lot of views, because we know that has an impact on the mind, body, spirit that causes folks to connect with each other and also come and stay more. You know, haven't heard, it's fun to stay at the YMCA once in a while. And then Kent, Washington, I throw this one in just because this was in the center of a public park just south of Seattle that we built a couple years ago. And it was kind of nice because it went from a somewhat unactivated park where it was a little bit more passive, some walking, jogging trails, to a very activated park. And one of the things the Y brings to the table is the ability to program those spaces. So not just throw a ball out there and say, let's play football at 9 o'clock in the morning, but to actually have job fairs or farmers markets or pickup games or anything else that kind of happens. So the Y kind of becomes the hub in some of those zones. So where we are in the process, this is through our schematic design. What we would do is from this point refine that, go to a local cost estimator in the area to get a price tag on what's been created so far. Once again, create that operating pro forma so to make sure we're sustainable. As a mission-based, charitable nonprofit, we serve folks, but we also firmly believe in no money, no mission, and we don't like to come back, to find funds to operate these buildings. They are self-sustaining operations in their own, which is a huge asset for relieving the burden of government. We would finish up the funding collateral, and then really at this point, it's a go, no-go. Is this something that we're going to move forward with? If approved, then that would go into the funding stage, and then ultimately the team formation and into construction documents and construction. So with that, I'll take any questions.
I'll just mention, we've used Grow and Brian's team on numerous projects, and I think when you're trying to build a facility like this that can serve over 10,000 people, provide outreach programs, make a community impact, learning from buildings of the past and projects and how we can both maximize and be good stewards of our resources is crucial. And so with Brian and his team, you have the very best that there is in the country around these types of programs. And it's essential that you take all the data that we've been working on collectively together with the market study, the fundraising feasibility study, and this conceptual work, and then you follow that plan, because at the end of the day, to Brian's point, a successful YMCA is a YMCA that never turns anyone away, can meet core community needs, whatever that looks like. So if it's learn to swim programming for 5th graders within St. Mary's County, if it's supporting mentoring programming within the community, whatever those outreach pieces look like, preventative health programs for older adults, you got to be able to do all that, and at the end of the day, take care of the facility and balance the budget. And so what we know is if we do all the homework that's necessary, we follow those steps, and we're good stewards of those resources, the Y will be successful in the community. It'll accomplish all the objectives that you want from a mission-based standpoint, and then financially it's sustainable, which is imperative, obviously. And so I feel really good about the work that your community leaders have done to this point. and I feel like we're at a really good spot. So happy to answer any questions you may have.
Tell me, the one in Kent County on page 34 is under construction. You said it's 50 to 55,000 square feet. How much does that cost to build?
So that project's going to be right at 15 million. It broke ground in September, pre-pandemic, and so we were fortunate there were no issues related to supply chain, and lumber wasn't $700 for a piece of sheet plywood and that kind of thing. We are, here at the end, we are seeing some supply chain issues with flooring and some pieces like that, but pricing-wise, we're in a pretty good place there. We're not as fortunate in Queen Anne's, where we're scheduled to break ground on that project closer to the first of the year, and those issues with steel prices and other issues are having an impact there. So.
Okay, because in our budget, we talked to about a $16 million project, and of which $5 million we're talking for outside other sources. And what I think makes that important is recently we've had outreach from Senator Cardin's office, or Roderick Lewis, who's there, and indicating that this may qualify as an earmark. We've also recently had a Veterans Day parade where I had an opportunity to see Roderick and also to see Terrence. I can't remember Terrence's last name, but he's with Congressman Hoyer's office. And both of them indicated there would be potential for earmark. But it talked about shovel-ready. And shovel-ready gets to be that elusive, what does that mean? It obviously, at least to this commission, doesn't mean you have a permit in hand, you're ready to go, because who would do all that work unless you had the funding lined up? But it talks about an opportunity that allows itself to, we've talked about DCIP, I think that's called Defense Community Improvement. We've seen Fort Drum in New York get $9 million for YMCA. Those are encouraging things. So I think synergy here is an important part. But back to shovel-ready. So in our discussions with both those gentlemen, it was like, well, you guys need to have your engineering at least started, approved, started.
Yep.
You need to have the site under control. Now, it could mean 12 months. It could mean 14, 16, 18 months. But the key gets to be is where you are in the community as a one. It can't be just be an idea.
Right.
So with that said, I just think we're in a great timing right now.
You've got some great connections at the federal level to where congressionally, I don't say earmarks anymore, so congressionally directed spending can be allocated to a project like this. The county's participation in a project like this, community fundraising in a project like this, then in essence what you're doing is you're making that project more attractive for congressionally directed spending, because you've got a huge amount of buy-in at the county level, at the community level. You're not asking for the government to build your building, but to play a role in helping fill in the blocks that still need to be covered. So I think it would be a tremendous candidate for those. So long as the political dynamic stays as it is, it would be, and congressionally directed spending is still a thing, it would absolutely qualify and probably do very well based on the conversations I've had.
Well, I think it's important to note that the Patuxent Naval Air Museum was done on an earmark from Congressman Hoyer. And that was probably 15, 20 years ago, $3.7 million. And it made that facility happen. And that now is on county property. Great news is it's been a big success. It's got Blue Angels out there, F-22s, F-35. I mean, it's really something for people to see. So I think we're in a great point, a great opportunity to make this happen with the outside funding that we're looking for.
Yes, sir. And the snapshot you got today will be backed up by 30 pages of technical drawings. As an architect, I like pretty pictures, right? But as a nonprofit design consultant, our projects are always very tied to the capital stack and how we get them built. So we've had great success with our packages of drawings being considered shovel ready, because we know that where they go from here to the local architect, they have to be engineered, right? The steel layout's done. We've got to size how deep the beams are, how big the footings are, and things like that. But a lot of this stuff is already figured out to the point that when we hire the local design expertise, it's just a matter of getting it a little bit more engineered and construction document ready. But the heavy lifting is done. We just did a project in Memphis, Tennessee, and Whitehall down the street from Graceland that was considered shovel-ready last November from the package that we pulled in for new market tax credits. And we've done a number of publicly funded, whether it's through tax credits or other sources on these projects. Nothing is 100% fundraised anymore. You know, it's always a sense of new market tax credits, opportunity zones, you know, propositions in California for different things. But, you know, we look at this because if not the why, I mean, this is like basically they're written for these things. You know, they're community assets that do good, and for an organization that's been here for 170 plus years. So we think that with a little bit more, probably another week or two, that package that we'd be happy to share would be pretty much ready to go.
Good. Couple questions. When Marcia Greenberg started this thing 3 or 4 years ago, I remember she had a summer program and a bunch of kids came around, and the goal was a community center. And the community center idea was a place for, you know, basketball courts, kids to hang out, et cetera. And over time now this has grown into a YMCA, and I'm very happy to see the people here, and thank you guys for all the work you're doing and the support you're giving us. One of the things I wonder about, and when you put up all the list of activities, is that many of the activities that you're providing or going to wish to provide are now in the community within a 3 or 4 mile radius. And I realize that, you know, one of the goals of this is we can get everything under one roof. But simultaneously, I want to recognize the fact that we have, you know, the senior center just down the street, which is a mile away. We've invested tremendously in our parks and our infrastructure over the last few years, et cetera. And as you inevitably would build this program, you'll begin to compete with programs that the county already has. I mean, I just think that's a little common sense approach to have. I see you nodding your head, so I guess you tangentially agree with that one. So the question I got is that we've built infrastructure over here and have programs that are existing and working, and you're coming in to build a program that basically is, in many cases, duplicative in nature. How do we separate the fact that, you know, the crowd wants the community, the commissioners to build the building along the way? And I know when I talk to my fellow commissioners over in Talbot or Queen Anne's and things like that, those were privately funded along the way. Where's the yin and yang in all that?
And so I'll speak to that. So when you did the market study really analyzed the collective community, and that's where you came up with the need, and 10,000 people said that they would participate, right? So you know that there's 10,000 community members right now that if that YMCA was sitting there would participate in that. There are amenities within this facility that don't currently exist within this community. So a warm water pool to where you can do water-based classes that are more water therapy-based, as well as, to Brian's point, I was also a Blue Lip kid, learned to swim in a cold water pool. So to be able to do water safety programming, you also don't have a community hub where hundreds of kids can go after school and it's a safe place to be. And so there are components within the community that are missing. And then logistically, when you talk to the Navy base and there's 350 kids on a waiting list for an after-school program, this Y is really not built and designed to host those kids there. And so there are community challenges that this Y won't address that you still collectively need to solve. The other thing to this is you have other not-for-profits within this community that have limited resources and tools from a facility standpoint and programmatically. The Y will be an enhancement to that to be able to support that. So in communities like Talbot County, every person that's a part of that Talbot Mentors program gets a free membership. They use the YMCA as a place to spend time with their mentees as a part of that. We do a boater safety program in partnership with the school system and the Miles River Yacht Club and the Power Squadron. And so every kid goes through a boater safety program as a part of that. So you got to think of it in the standpoint that there are pieces and components to this that aren't truly currently in this community that can be served, and those are the things that the Y is going to focus on. The other thing I would say is when 9% of the community are involved in health and wellness in some capacity, and we've got 80 million people that are pre-diabetic, like there's a huge gap around preventative health and support. And no one comes into the Y and says, I missed you treadmill number 7. Like that's not how it really works, right? They're bonding and connecting to other people. And so when you think about group exercise classes, kindred groups of people who are fighting cancer or Parkinson's, you're creating a space to then collaborate and work together. So if you really looked at other communities where the YMCA is working on the Eastern Shore, we're not in direct competition with anyone. If anything, we're actually collaborating and working with Parks and Rec, working with other not-for-profits on a daily basis to make an impact. Remember, we're just a not-for-profit, right? So there is no shareholders, there is no anything. Our objective that's led by our volunteers, just like yourself volunteering in this role, is to make sure that YMCA is changing the lives of people in that community, and as staff, we're responsible for delivering it. In today's world, you cannot do it independently anymore. You have to collaborate and partner together. So I think when you see a study as strong as this, that 10,000 people would like to see this type of facility, programs, and services, it shows there's some gaps that need to be solved. And I don't disagree. There's probably some things, you're absolutely right, that are there and so forth, but this facility is not designed as an example. That pool would not be designed to compete against the Great Mills pool. It'd be a totally different type of pool.
No, and that part I understand, but I think since we started the program, we've also been very fortunate to be able to take a Leonardtown pool over just down the street here, and that has a warm water pool and the accommodations that you are proposing.
So that college pool is a really good example. So if you look at that facility that loses money, from a dynamic standpoint, does it have a space where kids can hang out after school? Does it have a gymnasium? Does it have a space where people can congregate and meet? The wellness center is smaller than this space here. And so if you're looking at what it does have is a lot of offices, right? So it was built in an academic purview. Mm-hmm. And so it's built in that capacity. So that's a really good example. That facility is a really good example of something built to serve academic purposes, but not collective community purposes. And so there's limitations to it.
Yeah, and there's, we'll pick on aquatics a little bit. There's no YMCA pool in the entire country that makes money by itself. It's a very hard business to be in, but if we're not doing it, then who else is going to do it? And one of the things that the Y can do is pair that with a business model that serves families and serves health and recreation members to come in to be able to provide those services that aren't necessarily, we're not Goldfish Academy, right? And so the overall business model, the 4 things that drive membership at the Y for those 10,000 people is parking, child watch, wellness, and group exercise. Gyms don't, pools don't, community multipurpose rooms don't, but they are huge assets. And what the Y can do with those spaces is if we do them right, it becomes a de facto senior center. We don't set out to make our Ys like that unless we have a partnership where we have, co-located those. But at the end of the day, we want folks to want to gather there and find something that's appealing to them. And for us, that's more than just the kid that wants to come in and play soccer or basketball. It's the kid that doesn't want to do sports. They want to do art. They want to do music. They want to make a friend. They want to do e-gaming. And so all those programs cost money, and the programming expertise that the Y can bring and the private donor base that gets behind these visions is something that really starts to make these things sing when they're done properly. So it's not just about the place and who we're serving, because I think coming back, we want to be good neighbors, and that's always a huge thing for us. We won't get into upper level sports if there's an organization that is doing that, but we might do tiny tots to get kids to 3, 4, 5 years old that will then go to play soccer at a different level. And so that's where it comes into filling the voids, to be able to understand who's doing what and how we can be partners with. Some of our nonprofits or YMCAs, we have one in Tennessee that serves, I think, 62 other nonprofits within an old Kmart building that we bought for like $1 million. And so it just kind of created a place that people can come and gather, in those areas.
And with the senior centers that you've built, which are tremendously resourceful, I think, as a community, your ultimate objective is to get as many people involved in programs and services and connection as you can. I think what we learned in the pandemic is senior populations and families with limited resources were the ones that were the most isolated. So access to food and activity and socialization was huge. And so having a multitude of places where people connect it's not a bad thing, because some people are going to say, well, I've always gone to the senior center and I like that and this or that. You're going to have others that connect to the Y too. So remember, we're in this with you guys together as a not-for-profit. The ultimate objective is saying, collectively, are we making the biggest possible impact that we can in our community? And so definitively, without a shadow of a doubt, the data and the community shows there's some gaps that can still be filled, and those things aren't going to drive other things out of business. If anything, I think what you'll find is other niche markets that become more prevalent that aren't now. So as the Y gets more people involved in preventative health and wellness programming, you're going to see hot yoga studios and things that are more niche based, to where the Y is never going to provide hot yoga. We don't have our hot yoga space has to also be a space for kids at 3 p.m. when 200 kids walk across the street. So we can't dedicate space for that kind of stuff. So you're going to see other for-profit providers come into the community to provide complementary or services that the Y is not going to reach. Long answer, I apologize.
That's fine. So I'm just trying to balance in my head, and I will say this, I have no doubt in my mind that this ability for you guys to manage and run these things is superior. There's no doubt in my mind.
Appreciate that.
And I appreciate your honesty and your sincerity that you've been coming over here with us for. But I said the concern I have is we've been working on a multitude of different avenues, and I don't want to run anybody out of business, for lack of a better word, particularly my Rex and Parks folks who've worked diligently over the years to get their programs up and running, and sometimes they're underutilized and sometimes they're overutilized, and
sure.
It's a ping pong game.
I'm not personally, I've been in the Y 25 years. I'm not personally aware of any Parks and Recreation Department that closed because of a YMCA. If anything,
I don't think you'll
I think
close
their, I think their job got busier. Their work got busier because more people became more engaged in programs and services.
So good presentation.
Commissioner O'Connor.
Oh, go ahead, John.
Go ahead, John.
Just two questions. One, who funded the Kent County project? And if you could please be specific in the funding sources from Kent County.
Sure. So we received a private contribution of $11 million for that project, and then a grant from a foundation for $1.5 million. The state has provided $250,000. Another private foundation funded another $250,000, and the rest will come through community contributions.
Okay. And I guess not the second question, I guess would be more of a statement is, there's been conversations during this meeting that, federal funds can be used and contributed toward this project. And, that is the case, that there is federal funding out there in the federal government somewhere to be found. I think that there's a misnomer in the community based on some conversations that I had that there is actually funding allocated for this. So to this point, I would say there is no funding from the federal government that is allocated. The base has committed no funds, and the senators and congressmen have committed no funds. I think there's some steps that need to be taken in order to see where they actually sit, which is our staff reaching out through consent letters to these offices. So there's some official communication versus sidebar communications with non-decision makers when it comes to where this additional funding will be had. Because, for this project, it would be nice to have multiple funding sources come forward, but quite frankly, no disrespect to the aides for the senators and congressmen, but they don't speak for them, and they can make all the promises in the world, but until I have a signature from a congressman or a senator that says they're actually going to take this up the hill, quite frankly, I can't bank on that. So I would like to see communication come from the commissioners in an official capacity, reference infrastructure projects, especially with a lot of the bills that are coming back.
Sure. So my experience with that would be you would want to tackle the low-hanging fruit first before you have those conversations at the federal or state level. And so that we can raise $2.5 million within the community through community gifts. Whatever the number the county is looking to put in, then you take what you can raise at the community level, what the county is putting in as a part of that, and then you leverage that for support at the federal and state level to say, hey, look, okay, this is a $18 million project. We have, through community fundraising, we're going to raise blank. The county is committed to X. Here's our shortfall. Will you support us in that? Our experience with that has been extremely positive in doing it. Where we do see struggling, if you're trying to, you're also, just so we're on the same page too, like many of the YMCA's on the Eastern Shore have been there for a long time, right? Some going all the way back to 1857, and facilities that are 100 years old. In these newer communities, in all cases, these are projects where you have collective private contributions, foundations, and public support to make it happen. So really, you're trying to put pieces to the puzzle together. The community piece is a core component to any giving, whether at the federal level or the state level. If you weren't going to raise that $2.5 million, you'd have a hard time getting any other funding. If the county didn't want to play a part in any capacity whatsoever, without a massive private contributor, you're not going to get it done either, because the feds and the state aren't going to play a role. And so we didn't identify that $10 million donor as a part of that study. So I think, though, because of Congressman Hoyer, your connection and close proximity to D.C. and the base, you have greater plausible opportunity for federal funding than any other counties on the Eastern Shore of Maryland does, for sure.
Have Talbot and Queen Anne's put in local funding?
So Queen Anne's County, there's a senior center that's within that project as a part of that, and they've committed $2.5 million to that project. The Talbot County Y, that YMCA was built, or the original Y was built, well, the original Y was 1857. The current Y was built in 1967. So the world looked a little different then. The YMCA in St. Michael's, the county did contribute some funds to that and helped secure, because there's a senior center in it as well. And so they helped secure some funding, Department of Aging grant for $800,000, as well as some state funding as well. So when we were looking at, you don't normally build a YMCA in a community of 4,000 people, but it needed it. So you had to get really creative. So the Y and the county and the school system worked very closely together to come up with a funding model that could make that work.
So it was a really good presentation. I definitely like the Great Mills area better than the Nicollet Park area. I think it fits better there. I feel like there could be some hesitancy among the commissioner board for building another pool right next to an already existing pool. Is it possible to take the Y and build it without the pool and make that a phase 2, make that down the road, full access and use of the Great Mills pool that's already there? Is that something that would be feasible and doable?
It's something you could potentially look at. I think there's risk involved with that. And so the risk involved with that is a warm water pool was the #1 identified item on the feasibility study. So if you extract that, the data that we don't know is how many people does that preclude from them participating in Y programs and services?
I mean, I took that survey too, and I'm not taking anything away from it, but it's it says, would you like a warm water pool? Of course, yeah, I'd love a warm water pool. Everybody would like that. But that was never part of the original intent of a community youth center. That came about
That
later.
whole thing changed when we started. You guys were investigating what would a YMCA and a partnership and collaboration.
Right. So, and I mean, I go back to, if you've seen one Y, you've seen one Y.
Sure, sure.
And so it.
The main goal in that process would be making sure if you extracted any component of that it was sustainable. So let's go back to the college facility that you're operating.
Right.
Without a shadow of a doubt, if that facility had a larger wellness center and a gymnasium, it would be more attractive to a larger collective group other than a very large pool and some very small office spaces. And so you just have to be cautious, because when you pull all the data and then begin extracting things, I would build you don't want to build a library but put the books in phase 2, right? So you got to make sure you're being extremely cautious in that. There's a reason why the process is pretty scientific in making sure that if you're building something, you're meeting those core communities. And to Brian's point, pools are just like big boats, man. They're expensive and lose money. But the gaps in that is that it draws more people in programmatically through partnerships and collaborations with school systems on Learn to Swim curriculum.
So a lot of that could still be done in the existing Great Mills pool. So that's kind of, I guess you're getting right at the heart of what I'm asking. Can you still break even? Can you still make money and make it feasible without that warm water pool? You take away a lot of your overhead costs there.
Yeah.
But maybe you don't have as many people sign up. I think probably everyone in purple shirts here would still sign up and join the Y. But
So in that particular scenario, you would have to there's a lot to figure out there, right?
Right.
Is the Great
Right.
Mills pool part of the Y? Is it not part of the Y? Is it independent of the Y and the Y is separate of that? What does that dynamic look like? When you're asking those questions, you're creating a model that helps you better understand how do you serve people? Because to Brian's point, the logistics of someone saying, well, I'm going to drive to the college in Leonardtown to be able to do X, but then I'm also going to hoof it all the way down to Nicollet Park for softball or whatever. Proximity and location to spend 3 or 4 hours as a part of me as an adult or a family is imperative. We have older adults who will come to the Y, which is kind of weird to see, in their Sunday best, right? And so they're wearing their heels and their Sunday dress, and they work with a trainer and they walk on the treadmill for 10 minutes. And then they spend 2 hours talking and having coffee. And so it's not about, the exercise is important, but it's really about the social. And for one of those ladies that does that 3 days a week, it is the only social time she gets the rest of her week, because outside of that, she lives alone as a widow. So you just have to, you're also trying to create a space where collectively everyone comes together. So if you're eliminating the pool as a part of the Y, then you somehow have to have a relationship that embeds it all together regardless with the existing pool that's in place. And knowing there were 10,000 people that want to participate, how do they infuse into a pool that your Parks Department would say is already inundated with space challenges as it is?
And pools are their own kind of micro business model. Right. One pool and another pool are hard to compare when you look at programmatic needs. And if anybody's a swimmer in here and you have one pool, everybody knows that if you have one pool, you keep the water at 84 degrees or 83 degrees, and that's too warm for lap swimmers and it's too cold for aqua exercise and learning to swim. So a two pool model that has a better depth, that has a little bit warmer environment, maybe one's indoor, maybe one's outdoor. They're not always compared equal. The Urbana YMCA that was contributed $3.7 million from the Frederick Public School Systems to offset some of the closing of some of their pools in the high school. They built an 8-lane, 25-yard pool, and they built a smaller warm water rec pool. And if you put a camera in there right now, you would see one person swimming in each lane in this huge pool, maybe 3 or 4 lanes filled, and you'd see about 25 people in the warm water rec. And the warm water rec is filled with seniors, and it's filled with teens, and it's filled with, moms and dads with young kids. So programmatically, it's just designed a little bit different to serve different populations. And when you look at a pyramid of participation, meaning at the top is like Olympic level swimmers, right? 50-meter pools and lots of lap swimming. We work on kind of the lower rung where there's a lot more participation, and a lot more need, around, water desensitization, safety around water, the aqua aerobics, recreational swimming. That starts to form stuff out. When we were doing the Y in Arlington, Virginia, the county Parks and Recreation Department had realized that there was a bust of 88 lanes. They knew it down to how many more lanes they needed. So the pools, weren't necessarily competing with each other. They were complementing each other, and you're looking at a county-wide curriculum that if you're doing swim lessons, you're probably going here. If you want to do more lap swimming, you're probably going to one of the other pools to get a lane, because we don't like to share lanes. And even though we say you might put 2 or 3 in there, people will self-select kind of where they want to go based on the area of focus that they want for that time.
I guess, closing comment, if that's something that you as commissioners want to explore, then I think what you would do is we would sit down and have a conversation around what does the dynamic of that look like? Is that Parks and Rec pool still going to be a Parks and Rec pool? Is it going to be part of the Y? I think we would all agree that taking the bubble up and putting the bubble down isn't really a ideal strategy long-term in what you're trying to accomplish. And then what are we giving up if we only have that pool, and what are our limits to it? We've toured that facility, and I know that that pool's fairly maximized, and you're not every kid within the county isn't learning to swim, and you have some limitations there too. So, I would personally be a hair nervous just because you're going. If it was 8 on the list, I'd still be nervous, but you're kind of going against 3 years worth of data that says, all right, well, if you take that away, how does that really impact? And at the end of the day, the Y is going to be responsible for making sure we can make it sustainable, and not you guys. So that's a big burden for us to make sure, okay, what we're building and the services we're providing and making. And the other thing too is making sure no one's turned away, that we have those capacities and resources to do it, and that the facility is sustainable in its model.
So I have a few additional follow-up questions.
Go ahead, sir.
Aside from the pool conversation that's been already had, the presentation that you presented on behalf of the YMCA, you believe is a sustainable business model, lowest risk, and willing to support, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. With that being said, you feel that it is the lowest risk to building a YMCA in St. Mary's County, and that it would be sustainable over the long term, turn nobody away, that this is something that the YMCA as a business model feels comfortable participating in, willing to support, willing to break ground, willing to build, dive in head first, right?
Yes, our board would need to formally approve that, but I don't get any sense based upon regular conversations with that group of volunteers that they would be concerned.
Okay, so with that being said, what is the YMCA willing to contribute to the project? Since this is a sound business model, you're saying it's sustainable, it's going to be long-term, turn nobody away. What is the YMCA going to contribute to the construction costs?
Sure. So I've personally committed well over 100 hours over the last 3 years at no cost to the county whatsoever, and coordinated a multitude of fundraising feasibility studies where I was in on that feasibility study where I was in on every call, and then working with this task force on this process. So what the YMCA is committed to doing is mobilizing and raising $2.5 million in this community, taking on all operational expense and operations for the facility for the length of as long as the facility exists, all ongoing maintenance expenses and capital expenses that are involved with that, as well as partnering and collaborating with other organizations and not-for-profits within the community. You got to remember, these are facilities that we budget a % of our operating budget to go into maintenance reserves, so we have funds that are in place to take care of our facilities, so they're always ready for company. This YMCA isn't a cash cow. It's not a Chick-fil-A where you're like, why don't they have more people? Why am I in line for 30 minutes for my chicken nuggets? This isn't how this really works. This is a place where you are leveraging every dollar that you get to make as big of a community impact at the end of the day. And if you can do that, you've done very, very well. When you look at a model from a funding standpoint operationally, 60% of our revenue comes from membership, about 20% from programs, 20% from programs. The remaining still comes from contributions. So the YMCA will be raising money locally annually to make sure we can provide financial assistance, securing grants for outreach programming and work within the community. It's not a for-profit. So the Y isn't sitting on $10 million in cash to write a check as a part of this project. What the Y is sitting on is a whole lot of talent and 175 years of resources and the capacity to leverage and mobilize a community to make something like this happen in partnership with the commissioners, yourself, the state, and the feds, and probably some other people as well.
And just understand my line of questioning. This is more about business in particulars and budgeting and getting the funding available. So it's not a detriment to the project that I'm trying to create. What it is realizing that there is other funding available. The YMCA is not willing to put anything into construction. It's actually it's just more of the longer sustainment.
Yeah, so you're right. You could take. Yeah, you're right. You could take all the data that's been collected over the past 3 years, and you could build a community center if you'd like to do that. You'd have to figure out how you're going to raise money, because people contribute taxes, and so writing a check to the county for that would be a little weird. So how do you have a community foundation in town, and they're going to fund it through that, and you got to have that piece. Based upon all these conversations, you're going to have to be able to accomplish the same objectives and not turn anyone away. And then it's going to be needed to run by your Parks and Rec department. And so what does that look like from a mobilization and expansion standpoint? And then, as I said, our model is we raise money every year to support outreach programs and assistance. And so your model as a community center may look different than that. My assumption is you don't currently raise funds for that type of work. So logistically, we're just different, right? So we've been around. We were established on the Eastern Shore a year before this county or this town was actually even incorporated. So Lincoln wasn't even president at the time. He was dillying around in Illinois determining whether he was going to run or not. So the Y's been around for a very long time. It's just it's a not-for-profit that is truly just built on strengthening the foundations of a community. And you as commissioners, this has been a fun process for me. I think what I've loved most about this process is meeting people in this community who are so passionate about serving those who need programs and services like this. And they're empowering you guys to figure that out. And it's you live in a great place. And so that part of it's been the best part for me. Collectively, as a YMCA, myself and Brian are willing to help in whatever capacity you want that to look like moving forward. But I would tell you, all the data and your community involvement shows there's a huge need. And you guys have the ability to make that happen for sure. We just have to put the pieces of the puzzle in place.
And I
think you made a very, very valid point. And one of it being, you said if, the county built a facility, how would we justify, taking monies into the county to build a county facility? And the reason I have my line of questioning and looking for all these other available funding sources, because at the same time, while it can fall under public-private partnership, we do have opportunity zones, various things that can be done with the YMCA. It's not just the community that is supporting the YMCA. It's the other 127,000 people that pay taxes in the county that I want to make sure I'm solid when I explain that we're taking taxpayer money, investing it into a nonprofit organization that the county will have no control over and no facilities, no nothing. So it'll be a private organization. So that's why I'm asking these questions. I just want to be able to articulate that, justify it, move forward, and look at the bigger picture here. And with that being said, I think our staff has some work cut out for them. And, I'd like the county administrator to take a look at these schematics with our staff as well, and then put something formal together, some consent letters for the senator, congressman, get them on the agenda at some point. This way we can start realistically looking at these fundings instead of just talking about, we've been talking about this federal funding for months, and talk just doesn't get anywhere. So I just want a good plan of action here, so there's a solid justification.
I think the schematics, as Commissioner O'Connor said, are important to be able to review and see different pieces. As I said, I have no doubt your ability to manage and run these types of operations along the way, but it's still somewhat of a challenge between a community center, a YMCA, and the needs and wants of the community overall that we're trying to, sort through here, not just today, but for the past couple of years, if that makes sense.
What additional data do you feel like you need?
You said something about schematics, didn't you, Brian?
Yeah, so what we saw today was just the floor plans.
Yeah.
We'll have elevation sections, structural diagrams, HVAC, all the kind of nuts and bolts, boring construction nerd stuff. But it's a pretty decent package that we pull together to get good pricing on.
Yeah, so really what happens next is if you want to move forward, they're going to do more detailed work on what the drawing and design looks like to where you could then hand that to a general contractor and say, if we were built to build this facility, what would it cost? And here's the site and how we would do it. Then they can come back and say, and there'll be challenges to that. You can't hold a price of steel for more than 3 days right now.
Believe me, we know that story.
Yeah, so, but they would say, I think the number is going to be blank and you need a contingency of X. And so his schematic design gets you in a position to figure out what that number is. As far as community data and all that, I think you have everything you need. So it really just boils down to you feel like you want to move forward or not. And to
you-
Commissioner O'Connor's point, I think before you have a conversation with a congressman or a senator at the federal level, you would want to know you're moving forward, and you would want to know what the county is going to contribute to the project as a part of that, so you can articulate that as a part of a funding model.
Yeah, and I think to build on what Robbie was saying, a lot of times these projects are, completely linked to funding because these projects get built. It's kind of a three-legged stool. You have your upfront cost to actually build the building. You have your ongoing sustainability of the operations in terms of staffing, and then you have your ongoing maintenance. And usually the ongoing maintenance and the ongoing staffing is something that the Y can do. But, in the upfront costs, are somewhat challenging. So I'd say about 90% of the projects that I work on these days is with some sort of partnership, whether it's healthcare, school district, developer, city, county, you name it. We partner to make sure that builds through. And when we go to look at this building, and this goes back to the data, and we've not only designed over 400 of these Ys, we've also studied about 900 of them across the country and what goes into highly performing YMCA's. So some of those stats that we showed in the beginning of the 11 square feet per membership unit, sometimes we get into these and we might want to add triple gym or 3 pools or whatever, right? It comes with upfront costs, but it also has staffing costs and also has ongoing maintenance costs. And what we know from the business model, meaning building communities up, we have to make sure that we have the business plan that can sustain that for the long term. So we can fund and we can build anything. It's just money is one of my favorite sayings, right, for this stuff. But we also have to know from an operational standpoint that we can continue to operate this for the years to come and maintain it.
And I agree with you on both those parts. And I think it's sort of some, if industry builds this by itself, it's one price. When government gets into it, it gets a lot worse. And I've sat here for 11 years to give you data to the extreme, as you well know, that once government gets involved, it just sometimes goes haywire.
I wasn't going to say it.
Well, so your procurement process looks different than ours. Davis Pick and Wage is something that many times, if you're building a school and other things you've got to deal with. In this situation, like in Queen Anne's County, the county's making a contribution as a part of that, and we have an MOU within the YMCA is building that facility, and so our procurement process looks vastly different than yours. So I agree. Those are all things to talk about down the road.
Yeah, those are, like I said, those are, I think, the concerns that I have, and I might be reflective of the rest of the commissioners. It's just a concern I've been not sleeping over a lot these past few days.
Well, I see on your page 39, you did talk to that this isn't the go, no-go phase of this project, that you talk here about refined schematic designs, cost modeling, pro forma funding, fundraising, collateral, and then there's a go, no-go point.
Yeah, I think there's a step one, do we want to continue? Step two, I think you really want to see what this thing's going to cost to build before we can just say, yes, this is the direction, as well as some of the operating budget and some of those other conversations that would want to happen.
Okay, so I think that kind of talks to some of the things we've been talking about.
Yes.
But I do believe we need to make some decision. Do we move forward or do we just kind of stall? I've been encouraged by the people here today, but also by the 17 emails we've gotten in the last 2 weeks encouraging us to do a YMCA. So I'm going to move to approve the YMCA site selection, concept plan, and to adjust project RP 2004 to reflect the results of the feasibility study, and authorize the Commissioner President to sign any related documents.
So I like the YMCA. I think it's going to be good for St. Mary's County, but I want to know just if we can take a look at it without building the pool and making use of the pool that's already there.
And we need a second to discuss, don't we, Commissioner President Guy? If there's no second, it dies for lack of a second.
Looking for a second. John, Your Honor.
Come on, do it. Everybody up.
So, calm down. So I want to move to approve the YMCA site selection.
Motion on the floor.
It died for lack of a second.
Okay.
Wait a minute, quick, finish from. Right now, we have no second, so I need to, that particular motion has been declined, and we'll postpone it until a later date.
Okay. So I want to move to approve the YMCA.
Not again.
Just a minute, please.
I'm done talking for today.
Gentlemen, wait a minute. Let's.
No, I don't have any motions right now. That's fine. I'm good.
6 years, not 4.
Nothing?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'm sorry.
Well, I can tell you this one thing. I swim and I use the weight room. If I were living down there, I would be going to the county pool and do my swimming. I'd go to the Y to do my weightlifting. I don't use the warm pool. So I would be using both facilities. These guys are saying, we're going to work together. That facility down there does not have a warm pool. They're going to put one in. So the people that don't want to swim laps, the people will use the warm pool. People like me who want to swim laps will use the county pool, just like I do here in Leonardtown. And then I'll go over to the Y and weightlift. That would be what I would do. The warm pool is for certain people. The lap pool is for certain people. They don't use.
Thanks, Larry. Larry, I appreciate it. I get the point you're making. Mr. President, what I'd like to see is our county continue this discussion. I think a YMCA is good. I think we should have it here. I think we can bring it here. I'd like to see if we can just continue the discussion to see if we can work out this pool, and I think we can get to where we'll get the full support if we can figure that out and see if that can work. And it's not something you can make off the top of your head right now. I get that.
So there's still a little bit of work that Brian needs to do to finish his scope, and part of that is what the ultimate design would look like. I'm happy to work with Dr. Bridget as we have a conversation around that. I would just say, as I said before, if you pull something out, there's a lot to figure out there, and if you pull something out of there and we're not comfortable that we can make that project sustainable without it, then you just have to figure out how the county would tackle that independently or with another partner.
Understand.
And that's fair.
That is fair.
That's fair.
Delaying the funding again. How long do we have to wait?
So we haven't delayed any funding.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Or at least bringing the motion up.
Yes.
I would caution you guys.
So this, Mr. President, this isn't right. We shouldn't be having this back and forth.
Excuse me, people, excuse me. This is a public meeting, and it's not a discussion, so please, I'm sorry, but this will be postponed with a later date.
Thank you. It's good seeing you guys again. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your hard work on the YMCA. Yay! Sorry you had to go through this. I go to that pool, Robbie, I go to that pool, I tiptoe in because I get cold. I tiptoe in the pool.
Hell of a wingman.
Ready.
You're a hell of a wingman.
They move that bubble every day.
Ready.
Last time I went, it was fuzzy mold on the floor. They didn't.
We're going to take a 5-minute break at this time.
I was talking to Robbie Gilson, thanking him. This is ridiculous. And Todd, you
Go again. Dr. Bridget, back to your county administrator time.
Thank you, Commissioner President Guy. And we are on item D from Recreation and Parks for Program Open Space Infrastructure Grant Award. Mr. Shepard presenting this afternoon.
Good afternoon, and thank you. Commissioners, you're aware that weeks ago that we asked your approval for an application to Program Open Space for $1.5 million for 5 separate projects. Well, I'm coming back to you today because that funding was awarded with the exception of the court improvements at Cardinal Gibbons Park and Hollywood Recreation Center. Now, the only reason that was not awarded, that's an acceptable project, a good project. I think but we still don't have the documents from the Archdiocese from St. Peter Claver Church as far as a memorandum of understanding or third-party agreement. As soon as that's done, then that will be awarded. So today, minus that $191,000, I'm asking you to accept the Program Open Space Award of $1,309,000.
It's a no-brainer. I move to approve and accept the Program Open Space Local Parks and Playgrounds Infrastructure Grant Award in the amount of $1,309,000 and authorize the Commissioner President to sign the related documents.
Thank you.
Second.
I have a first and second. All those in favor? Aye. Any disapprovals?
Aye.
Ayes have it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Trevor.
And item E is from the Department of Emergency Services with the FFY 2021 State Homeland Security Grant. Mr. Walker, Director, presenting.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay, so I've got two, want to make sure. So this is a grant that we do every year. We've come to you, we've given you what our uses are. Now the grant has come in. The dollar amount is $104,238. And I'm asking you to accept the grant so we can move forward with our projects.
I move to approve the FFY 2021 subrecipient agreement for the State Homeland Security Grant, Project US 2220, from the Department of Homeland Security on behalf of Emergency Services Department in the amount of $104,238, and authorize the Commissioner President to execute the related documents.
Second.
I have a first and second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any disapprovals? Ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. And item F is also from the Department of Emergency Services with the FFY 2021 Emergency Management Performance Grant with the American Rescue Plan Act acceptance. Mr. Walker?
So this one was actually a bit of a surprise for us. It was a very nice measure that we received from the Maryland Department of Emergency Management. So we did not budget, request, or apply for this, and they have given this to us. The grant amount is $25,993. It's going to be applied to our hazard mitigation plan. The cost for that is right around $29,000, and of course that's saving us quite a bit of money. And my request today is for you to accept this grant and let us be able to apply it towards that.
Favorite kind of grant, surprise ones.
Yes, it is.
Well, I move to approve the FFY 2021 Emergency Management Performance Grant, American Rescue Plan Act Grant US 2240 from the Department of Homeland Security on behalf of the Emergency Services Department in the amount of $25,993 to fund the Hazard Mitigation Plan update and to authorize the Commissioner President to execute the related documents.
Second.
I have a first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any disapprovals? Ayes have it.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Commissioners. And item G is from the Department of Public Works and Transportation with the FDR Boulevard Phase 3 Cody Holdings property acquisition to exercise the option contract and railroad right-of-way easement agreement. Mr. Diedrich presenting this afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Commissioners and Dr. Bridget. Pleasure to bring this in front of you, a very key piece of property for the FDR project. Very complicated piece of negotiation and work to bring this to fruition. I really appreciate the work that the county attorney's office has done, and of course Alan Settle to my right, the project manager, key person that kind of kept us all straight and kept us understanding what was involved in it. It does involve a number of trade-offs in it, which took a long time to negotiate. I think we got a great deal on it, And of course, this is a key piece of property for FDR 3A, which has been awarded to Great Mills Trading Post. And I don't know, Alan, can you just kind of tell us where we are with the project now and how this project or this piece of property fits in?
Yeah, Commissioners, good morning. We've recently held our pre-construction meeting for the FDR Boulevard project. We've also issued the notice to proceed, and that date was set for November 15th, which was yesterday.
Oh, good.
So work will soon begin at the site within the next few days. You should see construction crews out there at the site. They'll be beginning most likely at the Elks Lodge on the Elks Lodge side, Bay District Fire Department side of the project. We're working on clearing and grubbing. Erosion and sediment and erosion control measures will be installed, working our way down the project all the way down towards MacArthur Boulevard and then also down to Buck Hewitt Road. So that's underway. We did receive the preliminary schedule, which I have some good news with the schedule. This project was scheduled to be an 18-month project. Great Mills Trading Post is trying to, and on the schedule, try and have this completed by the fall of next year. So rather than the spring of 2023, we're looking at hopefully getting it done by the fall of 2022. So that's good news.
12, 13 months?
They're going to try and get this moving, get as many crews out there as they can.
You could delay it till December. Todd will be out of office, so then we can do it.
Well, no, we don't want that. We want to, we want to get this built and keep it moving until finally we can get down to Peg Road. So
I agree with you on
plan.
that. Sooner the better.
So the final piece to make sure the property is all clear for Trading Post to go from Sanders down to Buck Hewitt.
This is the piece where Cody Holdings sits kind of in the middle of this phase, the property. It's about 3.4 acres that's sitting there. But we have a right of entry. With the signing of the option contract, we can start work on the property.
I'm just saying, once we get this out of the way, there's no property acquisition to stop us from letting Trading Post complete this part of the project.
Correct, under this, yes, under this phase,
Good.
yes.
Good.
So we're almost there. Once you exercise this option, we can then move towards that property acquisition and deed signing, easement signing, and moving forward.
Right.
Okay, so you'll start at the 235 Chancellor's Run FDR intersection and move your way in. And this will allow you to get to at least San Souci? Don't we still have some hang-ups back in there?
Buck Hewitt Road.
It'll go all the way through past San Souci and down to Buck Hewitt Road.
Okay, I guess I know that, but have you gotten all the properties acquired now?
Everything's under contract. The only thing, there are some small pieces of property that we still have to record. We have option contracts signed. Everybody's in agreement. Our legal department is really assisting us and doing a great job trying to get the partial lien releases on those. We have 3 properties that are small pieces. We can actually work around most of these small pieces. And we have
If it comes to that, we can still move forward.
We can still move forward, yes.
Thank you.
Good.
Yeah, and David Weisskopf's staff is also helping us with 3B at this point, right?
Yes.
With the properties, so we really want to make this a continuous process.
Correct. We have SHA helping as well. Some of the tricky pieces we've forwarded over to Dave's office because those need some, it's a little bit tougher work with those because of some of the numerous property owners that might be involved with one piece, numerous owners, so we have forwarded to his office. We've recently just received the SMECO signed option, which is great because that's where their substation is at Peg Road, so that's ready to go. So we're just working our way through properties on that one, Phase 3B.
Well, happily, I move to approve the exercise of option contract and railroad right-of-way easement agreement with Cody Holdings, and the Commissioner of St. Mary's County authorize the Commissioner present to sign the related documents.
Second.
I have a first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you,
Alan.
Commissioners. And item H is also from the Department of Public Works and Transportation with the St. Mary's Transit System Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan. Mr. Diedrich?
Thank you. And Ms. Swint, Deputy Director Swint will also join me with this. This particular document needs a regular update. In this case, I believe most of those updates are actually staff changes and organizational changes. Is there anything substantive in this document?
Nothing
that's changed?
substantial in this change.
Is it all working? So you feel like we've got a good safety plan, we just want to get the actors
Yes.
in the right roles?
And on page 2, under the version number and updates, number 3, the reason for change, to update name change and changes in staff, update targets in section 3 and revise section 7, and those were only minimal changes to just advise how we are tracking.
Sounds good. I move to approve the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan and authorize the Commissioner President to sign all related documents.
Second.
Have a first and second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
No nays, ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. And item I is the Department of Public Works and Transportation as well with the St. Mary's Transit FY22 Grant Award. Mr. Diedrich, Ms. Swint?
Thank you. This is the operating half of the grant that comes down through MTA. We actually, yesterday, received the capital one, so we'll be bringing that one forward to you in December. This is the operating side is very important, although somewhat less so at this point because of the COVID grants that we've been getting, but it's still critical. It's important that we maintain the level of this grant so that it can be, they have a reference point for what we need for the following year. It's actually a series of it's actually a master agreement with a series of various operating agreements that are detailed in the appendix. So we have the regular operating, the operating rural, ADA, SSTAT, and what's the 503 operating? And
The 5307 and 5311?
yeah.
That's our public route split between the
Okay.
percentages, one for urban and one for rural.
Got it. Okay, very good. Pretty complicated document, but really the basic thing is keeps the buses running, pays the drivers.
Well, the bus has got to go.
I move to approve the FY 2022 Maryland Department of Transportation, Maryland Transit Administration, MDOT/MTA, operating grant agreement for the St. Mary's Transit System, STS, operating program in the amount of $2,708,340. Authorize the DPW&T Director to submit the grant the grant agreement electronically, approve the related budget requirements to realign federal, state, and local funding, and authorize the Commissioner President to execute the related documents.
Second, discussion real quick. A lot of times when we talk about STS, we are limited because there's federal funds that are being used to make any changes and stuff. And so when we look at this $2,700,000 total, really all over half of it by far comes from the county. The federal and the state is only just over $1 million of that, correct? Okay. Just making sure I understood that. Thank you.
Okay, on the motion, I think you said recommendation should be amendments, where it says related budget amendments.
Approve the related budget amendments.
Okay, I thought I heard recommendation.
As recommended by the, I'm sorry, looking at.
No problem. Okay, have a first and second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. And item J is also from the Department of Public Works and Transportation with the facility naming and dedication policy update. Mr. Diedrich?
Thank you. All right, so this particular document deals with, of course, some of the moving departments and elected officials that we've had. First one is to rename what we have been calling the old Garvey Center, and to reflect what the staff of that agency, there's only one agency that's in that building, Aging and Human Services, what they prefer. They'd like to be named what their building is, like Emergency Services that's next door. And the same for the old Armory, the former Leonardtown Library, that's now the Board of Elections. And it helps people find those locations. They're both buildings that only have one agency in it, and we felt that was the best solution. There is a policy that talks about physical features of the county or water bodies of water. We didn't think that those really applied in this case.
The Garvey Center, what is the, I mean, I've been in this county going on 60 years. I've known it as the Garvey Center as long as I've known about county government. Garvey must have been somebody, or is that just a name we pulled out of the air? Is that someone can, maybe Ms. Harris can help us?
Well, the Garvey Senior Center is now moved.
Where that came from?
Who was Garvey?
Huh?
Who was Garvey?
Oh, who was Garvey? I don't know.
Yeah, who was Garvey?
I'll admit, I don't know.
Why is it
I'm
called
sorry, I don't know.
Garvey? Maybe Ms. Harris may know.
I don't.
Okay. We'll fix that then.
That predates me, but it's a woman in the community that it was dedicated to Ms. Garvey.
And how long have you been here, Ms. Harris?
15 years.
15, yeah. I know. It's been a long time, and it predates a lot. Well, I don't think it predates me, but I do remember it being Garvey as for as long as I. So the reason for changing it would make it more.
Well, Garvey, the new building connected to the library, the two buildings together. So that's the Garvey Senior Activity Center. So the building next to the Chesapeake building was the Garvey Senior Activity Center.
You're talking about the old building.
Yeah.
We're talking about the old building.
Old building.
So the new building will
stay Garvey.
Technically, we have two Garvey centers right
So right now we have two Garvey.
We have one Garvey Senior Activity Center. We
Have
have
we determined what we're going to do with that building? Are we going to keep it? Are we going to tear it down?
Well, I have staff still in that building.
Oh, my goodness. Oh,
Yeah, quite a bit of staff,
Okay.
myself included, so.
That's good enough.
I'd like to have a place to work.
I don't think we're tearing it down anytime soon.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other part of the name change is the?
Oh, I'm sorry.
The other part of the motion is the?
The second
Control.
facility is the animal shelter.
Yeah.
Oh, and right, and again, the Animal Control Board voted on this particular suggestion in its last meeting and wanted to bring that forward. There was an amendment to that the animal control area within the building be named after Antonio Tony Malaspina. Yeah, Malaspina. And again, the Department of Public Works certainly fully agrees with that, and glad that the Animal Control Board focused in on exactly what they wanted to do, and we thought that was appropriate to bring forward to you.
And we want to recognize that we have our Animal Control Board President, Dr. Richardson, here with us to support this move, too. So it's good.
And I like the name, in St. Mary's County Animal Adoption and Resource Center. That's what it should be.
Well, then, Mr. President, I'll make the motion I move to rename the facility formerly known as the Garvey Senior Activity Center to the Aging and Human Services Building, and name the new facility the St. Mary's County Animal Adoption and Resource Center, with the animal control section of the new facility being named after Antonio Tony Malaspina, as recommended by the Animal Control Advisory Board, and authorize the Commissioner President to sign any related documents.
Second.
I have a first and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any nays? Ayes have it.
Thank you, Commissioners. And item K is from the Department of Aging and Human Services with the FY 2022 Senior Care Grant application. Lori Jennings Harris, Director, and Rebecca Kessler, Home and Community-Based Service Manager, presenting this afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Again.
As just mentioned, this is the application for the Senior Care Program FY 2022. We are applying to the Maryland Department of Aging. The grant amount that we are requesting is $126,106. The Department of Aging and Human Services is one of 3 agencies that coordinates services to individuals, helping them to remain in their home, and those other two agencies include the Department of Social Services and the Health Department.
Tell me, have we gotten these grants in the past?
Oh, many years.
I know. I know the answer to that question, but I know you ladies do a wonderful job getting these grants.
Thank you.
So do you expect it to just be another happen again?
We do. We expect that we probably will get the amount that we're requesting.
Good. Well, I move to approve the Senior Care Grant Application, project number MD2203, from the Maryland Department of Aging on behalf of the Department of Aging and Human Services in the amount of $126,106 to provide assistance to the seniors of St. Mary's County and authorize the Commissioner-President to execute the related documents.
Second.
I have a first and second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Ayes have it.
Thank you, Commissioners. And item L is the Department of Aging and Human Services also with the FY 2022 Senior Rides Project MD 2205 Notification Grant Award. Ms. Harris?
Thank you, Dr. Bridges. So this is the grant award for the Senior Rides Program, FY 2022. We have received $14,000 from MTA, which is about $8,000 less than we received last year. But we're trying to ramp up the volunteers who provide transportation to seniors to doctor's appointments and errands, and hoping that we'll get more volunteers on board again this year, following the height of the pandemic.
All right, I move to approve the Senior Rides Operating Grant Agreement, project number MD 2205, from the Maryland Department of Transportation, Maryland Transit Administration, on behalf of the St. Mary's County Department of Aging and Human Services in the amount of $35,652, which includes other revenue and county funding, to coordinate door-to-door transportation for low and moderate income seniors who are unable to utilize other transportation options, and authorize the Commissioner-President to execute the related documents.
Second.
Okay, got a first and second. Discussion. Does this provide rides for seniors who call in to say for a doctor's appointment? Do you take them to the doctor's appointment and bring them back?
Yes, eligible seniors, yes.
And is there a certain time limit when is this just open, 8 hours a day or something for this, or how does this work out?
For the most part, yes.
Yeah, really?
Just
Okay.
depends on when their doctor's appointments
I'm
are.
only saying that because I had a senior said that, I suppose maybe it was the STS service where they called up, they could take them to the doctor's appointment, but they wouldn't bring them back. They had to get the STS bus schedule to get back.
No, that wouldn't be this. So this is
Okay.
supported with volunteers. So volunteers pick the individual up from their home, take them to their doctor's appointment, wait for them, and then they transport them back home.
Really? Just 5 days a week you get this service?
Yes.
Very good.
When we have the
I
volunteers.
got to pass this on to 2 individuals in because they're unaware of it.
Getting ready to say you can't make use of it, Randy.
Oh, no, I can't use it. I don't need it. I might need it later now, but right now, no. I do have one lady, she said she was told that she had to walk she lives off of Route 5 to her house. Of course, she can't walk very well. She used a walker. She's half blind. This 88-year-old woman. And I said, well, that doesn't make sense. We surely got better service than that. I got to get some numbers from you to take to this lady.
That may be a question for Mr. Dietrich.
Mr. Dietrich goes, he provides this transportation?
No, that's...
Senior Rides is with the Department of Aging and Human Services, but other transportation.
Okay, do you have your own vehicles for this, or is this strictly
This is volunteer, so they use their own vehicles.
How's this been coordinated with those who are afraid of COVID? Has there been,
Well, the program suffered last year. We weren't
I bet it
providing
did.
transportation, but we're doing all that we can and all that we know to do to protect everyone involved. And there are some volunteers who have not come back because they're concerned
Is that
still.
right? Okay. Well, it's a good program. I hope we can expand on it, whatever, because I know I got 2 people that complained they couldn't get transportation. So I'll pass this on to them.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a first and second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioners. And item M is from the Department of Economic Development with the lease agreement with Homegrown Market. Mr. Casalemas presenting this afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
Commissioner.
Welcome back again.
Several hours later. Today, we're asking Commissioners to approve a 5-year lease with the Homegrown Farm Market LLC. In 2010, a 10-year lease agreement was executed that allowed the Homegrown Market LLC to construct and manage the farmers market on county-owned property for 10 years. 1 year ago, we asked Commissioners to approve a 1-year lease term extension while we went out and did an RFP to try to get someone to run all 3 of our markets. We were not successful in doing that, so we're asking Commissioners to enter into a 5-year lease that's renewable automatically for another 5 years with the same group, the Homegrown Farm Market LLC, who does a great job. The lease is for $1 a year, which is what we do now. The only other change in the lease is that now we're requiring them to create a board of directors that includes 3 members from my department, 1 member representing the community, along with 3 members who are active members of the Homegrown Market.
I had seen that in there, and I think that's a great move. How is it being done? Who are the prime players there?
So right now, it's just the board of directors of the LLC, and those are people who are in the market, so they're vendors right now.
Are they elected by their own vendors, or how are those people selected?
I don't know the answer, but I bet, I don't know if Donna's here.
Well, I just wondered how that governance
Donna
was
Sasser
done.
will know the answer.
There's nothing wrong with it. I think it's great to have the homegrown market.
Well, and the idea is to have some input for things like when we went through COVID and we had to change things, we want to make sure we have some input. If there's controversy over a new vendor coming in, we'll have input into how that gets settled.
Well, that's where I guess I'm going with this, is I did hear about one vendor who wanted to go that someone didn't like or didn't want them there, and they felt it was nothing they could do, that this person didn't want them there, and therefore they weren't going there.
Right.
How's that work?
Yeah, they've done a pretty good job, but they are a little insular now, so this gives us some input and also a community member some input too. So Donna, about the board.
So the Homegrown Farm Market LLC is actually a limited liability corporation, an LLC.
Okay.
And it was started with 7 farmers, of a diverse group of farmers. There are, most of them are vendors at the market, but there are a couple that are not members or do not currently participate in the farmers market that are on the LLC.
Well, how do people get to determine who goes there or not? Suppose someone comes there and wants to do something, and for some reason somebody doesn't want them. What's their recourse?
So at
Sasser, could you move the microphone towards you, please? Thank you.
Excuse me.
So in the past, the LLC would meet and review the applications and look at space in the farmer's market and determine if there's space to add a new vendor. For the most part, I think they've been extremely accommodating to most folks. But what the whole reason for putting that extra language in the lease agreement is just for that reason. If there's someone who comes forward and said, hey, as you said, so-and-so doesn't like me, or I haven't been able to get into the market, we will have the county, they will be meeting with members here, the county staff, as that executive board, and we can see if any of those complaints are valid.
Okay.
There were 3 provisions put in the lease. It was to deal with health-related issues. COVID was very challenging and a learning experience for us, and we did come in kind of like with a strong arm and said, hey, you need to do business differently. You can't be inside. You need to wear masks. You know, we set up all of the farmers markets for a while last year were drive-through. We know that, and we're very excited that Shannon Farms Park is going to come on board. But we also wanted to have those 3 vendors from the market and a citizen representative, as that plan gets developed, that they will be our go-to people from the farm, to represent the farmers market, to make sure that all of that works together. That the farmers market, you're putting a road through, that, again, everything works together and that everybody has a mutual benefit. And the third reason, as you mentioned, was, and if there is a vendor issue that needs to be decided at a higher level, we can do that here at the county.
Oh, that's good. Well, I support that. I move to enter into a lease agreement with the Homegrown Market LLC to manage the Homegrown Farm Market. I'm sorry, that was a Homegrown Farm Market LLC to manage the Homegrown Farm Market for a period of 5 years and have the Commissioner President sign the related documents.
Second.
Have a first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioners. And item N is from the Department of Finance to award the recommendation for solid waste transportation and disposal. Jeanette Cudmore, CFO, and Brandon Hayden, Procurement Manager, presenting. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. We are here, like Dr. Bridget said, for the award recommendation for the solid waste transportation and disposal award, and Brandon has the
Good
details.
afternoon. This is to receive concurrence to award the solid waste transportation and disposal management contract with the volume currently estimated at just over $2.5 million for this service. Solicitation was posted to the email and marketplace on October 5th, where 164 potential bidders were notified of the solicitation. Additional bidders were notified on the county website. 2 amendments were posted to respond to bidders' questions and request for additional information. 1 bid was received before the bid opening date on November 3rd at 3 p.m. We also received 2 no bid responses for this solicitation. Also with this contract, because logistical issues can become highly visible.
Very visible.
The department now has the ability to assess liquidated damages at $500 per occurrence, up to $1,500 per day. Plus, if a failure occurs on a weekend resulting in a transfer station closure where citizens are denied service, Public Works can assess $500 per hour of closure, up to $1,500 per day. So a maximum of $3,000 per day, where this was previously capped at $500. And it makes it much more aligned with the value of the services provided.
Good.
Good.
And then other causes of service failure aren't related to this vendor, but, equipment failure, traffic, volume limitations at the disposal sites, and material issues in the containers that we deliver to the disposal sites can create problems. And these instances would generally not be charged to the contractor as liquidated damages. Background numbers for the current contract, because the incumbent is the only bidder. Lucky Dog has hauled 7,329 loads of solid waste for St. Mary's County since December of 2018. Public Works made 14 deductions from invoices for service issues in the last 3 years for a 99.998% success rate. The department received $3,604.25 in credit from the vendor for these instances, and no disputes were received, meaning all issues were handled and resolved between the department and the vendor without escalation. No issues required a cure notice from procurement, and there have been 0 invoice deductions since June of this year that I could find. So we are seeking your concurrence to award to Lucky Dog LLC, subject to receipt and acceptance of contract-related documents.
Look, Brandon, go back.
pretty reliable.
You've had no complaints since June, so this is June, 4 months. You say you had how many complaints from June of 18?
The actual complaints, I only have documented about 3.
Well, I can tell you, I've called a lot more than 3 times over there to say something's wrong.
But there have been 14 deductions from invoices for what I presume were issues that they encountered and resolved
Prior to coming to procurement, right.
during those 3 years. And none of these issues were escalated to procurement. They were all negotiated
Well, yeah, it's wonderful to negotiate when you have a clause in a contract for a penalty, And I can tell you how many times I've called over on a Saturday or Sunday, and everyone's heard me complain about this before, but somehow it gets finagled, my word, it never gets to you. There's just something doesn't make sense.
I thought I'd better come up. Most of the issues have actually been with waste management on the recycling side, and their performance was pretty dismal at the beginning of this year, and that's now improved dramatically after we had a little sit down with the person that's managing that. Lucky Dog, though, has actually moved an incredible amount of trash, and as Mr. Hayden said, the only problem we had this year was actually due to an issue that happened at King George where they couldn't dump. And so the containers backed up. It's a 4-hour run to actually dump there, and it took closer to 8 hours that day, so we just didn't have enough containers. Another thing that's been fixed, though, in the, in the new contract is they're providing an additional open top, which will help eliminate that problem. So Lucky Dog hauls the blues to Covanta now for,
So I think the Potomac River Bridge has created some logistical challenges that we didn't have 3 years ago.
That's very true.
They'll hopefully be resolved over the next couple of years as that bridge opens up.
Right. Yeah.
That's why they're going to Covanta in Northern Virginia.
Correct. And it actually, the tipping fee's slightly less, the hauling's just is longer, but, and that is actually a waste-to-energy facility, so we don't get credit for recycling, of course, but it's, at least in some people's minds, much better for the environment. So I feel I wouldn't have signed it if I didn't feel they had dramatically improved. I realize, and I fully agree, there have been issues, but I think they got the message, and I think Waste Management's got the message too on the recycling side.
Good.
All right, I move to authorize the procurement officer to award the solid waste transportation and disposal contract to Lucky Dog LLC for the amount estimated to exceed $1 million, subject to receipt and acceptance of contract-related documents.
Second.
I have a first and second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Ayes have it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioners. In the Office of the County Attorney is item O with the disposition of criminal money forfeiture. Mr. Weiskopf presenting this afternoon. Good afternoon.
Thank you, and I believe I am last, and I am so impressed that the county administrator has it down at 12:45. Just amazing to me. So real quickly,
you got to hurry up.
As my memo states, approximately $135,000 was seized from the Brass Rail back in 2015 for a gambling complaint, and the proprietors did sign a consent order agreeing to turn it over to St. Mary's County, and that was done. However, there were two things going on. This money was seized as part of the there were those video gambling machines in there, but they had always had before pull tabs that the Lions Club received money from. And so the sheriff's seizure sheet actually showed that $5,743 was actually earmarked to the Lions Club out of that.
Tell me, pull tabs are illegal?
Yes, sir.
Okay, but video games are not?
The video games were definitely illegal as well.
But the pull tabs, that gambling's legal?
Look,
you're an attorney, sir.
Are you asking me whether or not all these local charity organizations are properly running.
Well, let's just say, I think the charity organizations are one thing, but Brass Rail is not a charity. Okay.
No, sir.
So, but the pull tabs are legal.
They're legal if you take certain steps, right? That nobody else gets the money other than the organization.
Third party.
Right, and all that stuff. And, yeah, probably some are more legal than others, right? Is that
okay?
Is that probably the way to?
I watched a movie and they said we're just bending the law.
Right. Or as Paul Newman said in HUD, sometimes you lean to one side and sometimes you lean to the other, right?
Okay, go ahead.
But roughly, it was $5,743 that all came into the St. Mary's County Commissioner account. And what we're asking for is to, cut a check, send the money back to where it belonged, Leonardtown Lions Club, and then the rest of it would just be deposited in the Commissioner's General Fund.
Yeah. Well, I move to approve the transfer of $5,743 to the Leonardtown Lions Club from the total of $135,572 that was seized by the St. Mary's County Sheriff's Office, and authorize the Commissioner President to sign the related documents.
Second.
Have a first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Ayes have it.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Commissioners, and this completes County Administrator time.
Good grief, about time. Okay. Looks like we're going to go right into Commissioner's time, and we'll start with Commissioner Hewitt first here.
Oh, goodness. I was first last time.
Oh, yeah? Well,
No, that's all right. I can do it.
I missed
Went
up
to
here.
last Thursday, we had the Veterans Parade. The thing keeps getting bigger and bigger every year. Thank God we had wonderful weather. Thank God the governor came down, and, hey, he was here 7 years ago, and he's here again this past one. It was a very, very well-attended event, and God bless our veterans. Secondly, we have fall weather. Lord knows you can see the trees. They're a little bit past peak, but they're beautiful. It's either whatever's happened this year has allowed us really to appreciate the change of seasons. And finally, we won't have another meeting next week because it's Thanksgiving. Great holiday, makes us appreciate being Americans. Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Very good, thank you. So I just want to echo Commissioner Hewitt's comments. The Veterans Day Parade was incredible. It's the best weather I've ever seen for a Veterans Day Parade, and it's the largest parade I've ever seen. Governor was here, there was a ton of people. We had Barry Glassman, who's the Harford County executive, came down for the parade, and he said it's the biggest parade he had ever seen and the biggest crowd, especially during the middle of the week. So it was very impressive. Very good job by all the people involved organizing it and making it happen. So thank you all. Thank you for everyone who attended. So last night I was fortunate enough to be able to go and attend Girl Scout Troop 4946's meeting and talk about compromise. Now we had hopefully they were in school today, so they probably weren't watching our meeting today, so they got to miss out on a good lesson on how not to compromise, but it was a good time last night, and I want to thank that troop for letting me attend and be there. Also, in the national news recently, they passed an infrastructure bill, and I don't want to talk about where $1 trillion comes from, if the money's even real, how you come up with that amount of money, but that's a lot of money. And interestingly, the bill specifically calls out bridges in it, and it says that Maryland can compete for a $12.5 billion bridge investment program. We have a bridge here that needs to get rebuilt, needs to be bigger. The Solomons Bridge, the Governor Thomas Johnson Bridge. So I would propose to the other commissioners that we send a letter to the governor and transportation secretary asking the state to make use of this, to compete for this money, that we can get to the Solomons Island Bridge, get that rebuilt, work with Calvert County on that, and I think that would be a good thing to do if we can try and take advantage of that. And I'll end with happy Thanksgiving. I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving. Thank you.
John O'Connor.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the Thanksgiving holiday coming up, I want to make sure that
everyone is reaching out to their family members, those they may have not been in touch with or haven't spoken to for quite some time. The holidays are always hard for our veterans. Please make sure that you're checking in on your family, veterans, friends, family that are out there. This time of year it can be difficult for people. While it's still a joyous time, we want to make sure everybody makes it through the holidays to enjoy it with their friends. On another note, what I witnessed today was something I was hoping that we wouldn't have to have in our county government. I've watched meetings across the United States where groups don't get their way and they interrupt meetings. They lose decorum and respect for the process, the governmental process, and that's what happened today. I have supported this community center, YMCA, and I don't agree in blanket yeses and just appeasing people because they want to hear a certain thing, which is yes, my way or the highway. When we're talking about $16 million plus of taxpayer money, it is our responsibility as good stewards of the taxpayers of this county to ensure every single facet of this project is examined. If it doesn't happen as fast as some would like, well, unfortunately, that's the process. If we don't look at it and examine it and make sure that we don't have facilities that already support these things, make sure that we're putting to use the taxpayer dollars to the best of its ability, then that's a problem. Today was mob rule. That's what this was. Mob rule. You interrupted a sitting county commissioner who was going to make a motion to support this project with a caveat in order to facilitate more research and due diligence beyond our staff. There's already money in the budget for it. I will never be a supporter of mob rule and interrupting the processes of government. Now, I have supported this project for an extensive period of time, and what I witnessed today, I can tell you right now, I absolutely 100% will never vote for the YMCA to be in St. Mary's County based on that behavior and those activities. There is 127,000 people in this county that we need to support. We need to go ahead and examine, that pay taxes. I explained to the supporters that this was not the way to make it happen. That we were here, we were going to support it, we were going to look at it, we were going to examine it. It's already in the budget, and it's not going to be expedited any faster than it is, so due diligence needs to be done. Today was lawlessness, and it was an emotional response to a logical solution that was there. The people in this audience, if this community is watching, are the ones that have caused this project not to move forward. Not the commissioners of St. Mary's County, because Commissioner Colvin was prepared to make that motion, and I was going to second it. But you interrupted him. Watch the video. You can see it, and that's why he said he was done. And I agree with him, and I support his decision. I hope that cooler heads can prevail, but I can tell you there's going to be a lot of legwork for me to get behind something when community members can act like that and interrupt a meeting. There's a time and a place for it. If you want to protest, protest, but you do not interrupt the meeting and think that you're going to get your way on a particular vote because of mob rule. That very disappointed, very disappointed. There's been lots of contentious items before these commissioners, and I will tell you right now, this by far was the worst one when it comes to behavior and decorum in the commissioners' meeting room. And I can tell you that I can't think of any other one, actually. So with that being said, I have nothing. I'm just extremely disappointed. And Mr. President, thank you for trying to get the meeting back in order. Thank you for taking that recess so everybody could reset and we can move on with the business of this county.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. Todd, it's your
Thanks,
turn.
President. Also, yeah, as the commissioners pointed out, we had a great Veterans Day parade up in Leonardtown, well attended, a lot of people. People are happy. It was a nice day out, so it was freezing like 2 years ago when it was 40 degrees and raining. Commissioner Guy and I also went up to Helen, had a great event up there with Hills, and they have their annual memorial service up there. think they added 3 or 4 more names to the Helen plaque. They're going to get a couple new flagpoles courtesy of SMECO. All good. Commissioner Colvin touched on something called compromise. And I want to thank Robbie and Brian for coming here and presenting the case for the YMCA. And there'll be a compromise in this. It just can't be just one way or the other way. And I think that the commissioners will dutifully examine everything that's going on and figure out what is best for the needs of the community as a whole. With that, it's a process. And we'll let the process continue. I'll be interested to see the schematics that Brian said they'd be bringing down to us, and we'll see what it says. And lastly, as the other commissioner said, happy Thanksgiving to you. Have a good time with your families and friends if you're traveling. Be safe out there. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioners. First thing I want to say to you, we seem to be still on the high side on this COVID-19. If you're ever hesitant about getting your shots, you should go ahead and do it. I've had all 3 of mine, and 2 Pfizers and a booster, and I feel fine. So I think these are effective, and the sooner we get all this done, the sooner we get our country back in the normal, it'll probably never be totally normal, but at least a little better than wearing masks everywhere we go. We got to stop this. I've been on several boards here lately. Like last night, I testified at finally around 7 o'clock last night on the statewide redistricting, and it's very important that we all pay attention to this because it throws our county, some of the boards that the maps I've seen, part of it totally up into Anne Arundel County of all places. And these things we got to really look at hard, and you got to voice your opinion. If you want to go check it out, the website, go ahead and check it out and make your opinion known. I don't know how much testimony it took last night, but it took an hour to get to me when I finally got it. There was a bunch of people testifying. And the other day, we're also, something else that's been pretty important too, I'm on this opioid litigation board for MACO, and we're having a problem with the state, you might say, getting all the money. They don't want to give much to us as far as the counties. So it takes, we're working on that with MACO's representation and 6 of us on the board for Maryland Association of County, and then there's 6 others on the MLL, they call it, the municipality side, and of course a bunch of lawyers. So it's interesting what's going on, but the county wants, the state wants to control all the money, and I told Mr. Frost the other night, I said, look, we're very capable of spending our own money. We really don't need the state to regulate and tell us how to spend our money. We have a problems like everybody else, even the big counties. We all have these drug problems, and we spend a lot of money already in our county trying to rehabilitate people and get them back out there in society. And it's going to be an ongoing thing. It's not going to stop. And it's a very costly project, and I would like to see us get some of this funding. I think it's about almost $500 million coming to the state. Another thing, too, is the Veterans Day Parade. It's very touching to me. I suppose it's been 26 years in the Air Force, time in Vietnam, and Memorial Day. Veterans Day is very, I got to push back and say, wow, I just remember all the, unfortunately, the men, and mainly men over in Vietnam who died at a very young age, 18, 19, 20 years old, and never got a chance to see life like I have. And I'm grateful to God for that, but then at the same time, all veterans need to be treated with dignity and everything else. It took a hard time for a lot of the Vietnam veterans to realize, you might say the government sort of suppressed a lot of things. Like for those who were exposed to Agent Orange, there was probably almost 20 years before they finally decided, okay, yeah, that probably could have caused some of your diseases, because a lot of them had died by that time. But anyway, things are straightening out, and it's a little more respect now for the veterans, and they're getting a little more better care. Just like for us down here, for those of you who don't realize, we have two actually central base operating centers, or VA outpatient clinics. In most counties, we'd like to get one, and we've got 2 of them right here in our it's sort of a tri-county type of thing, but it's brought a lot closer than going to Washington, D.C. and Baltimore for many of our veterans, and I'm grateful for that. With that being said, enjoy your Thanksgiving, and don't eat too much turkey. I need a motion to enter into closed session.
I move to enter into closed session to discuss personnel, legal advice, and litigation.
Second.
I have a first and second. Before we do this, I'm going to say we're going to go outside here in the foyer and have a memorial ceremony for Dale Smith.
So before the vote, we're going to do it?
No, we're going to vote right now. Closed session?
We'll vote for closed session, adjourn to the...
And we'll go ahead and do this first, and then come back. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, let's go right into...